3rd, and I will call the roll. Vice Chair Keene.
Here.
Commissioner Han.
Here.
Commissioner Chu.
Here.
Commissioner Kopp.
Here.
All present and accounted for. I will ask agenda item number 2, public comment on matters appearing or not appearing on the agenda. Is there anyone who wishes to make public comment? Seeing none, we will turn to item number 3, which is discussion and possible action on draft minutes for the Commission's December 19th, 2016 special meeting. Any of the commissioners have any comments or corrections?
I've got a couple of either grammatical or literary additions, and one suggested rearrangement of language, and one question on page 4.
Commissioner, could you speak into the microphone?
On page 4, under discussion for enforcement report, the end of the second paragraph, there's a reference to, let's see, Ms. Bloom noted that BDR had attempted an asset search of Mr. Chris Jackson, and the court's investigation determined that there are no assets, etc. Is the court the right word? Do you remember? No. I didn't think you said court.
No, that should be BDR. Good catch. Huh? That should be BDR. Good
BDR.
catch.
Yeah. Okay. May I propose that change, Mr. Chairman?
You may.
And then on page 5, above the words public comment, and maybe I should ask how we phrase this as a custom and practice, the executive director, in the present tense or the past tense, because that sentence says the individual commissioners acknowledge in the present tense, and I'm going to suggest this change. The individual commissioners acknowledged and congratulated the executive or executive director Pelham on her election to the governing board of the Council on Governmental Ethics. And I've written this out. And then also above that, the last emphasized point in the first paragraph, in conjunction with the Controller's Office, it should be present tense there, develop definitions of the types of activities, not past tense, develop.
All right. Any other commissioners' comments or corrections? Assuming that those corrections are made, I'll take public comment on the minutes if there is any public comment. If not, I'll
move approval as amended.
All right.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are accepted unanimously. Turning to item number 4.
I'm sorry, Commissioner. Did you ask for general public comment?
I did ask.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yes, there was no comment.
My apologies. I must have missed it.
Number 4 is, come to the microphone.
Because I was trying, excuse me, first, my name is Alpha Buie, and I am mentioned in item number 3, and I raised my hand, and I think if I'm looking at the agenda correctly, that this is the item that you're speaking of right now.
No, that's item 4 that we're coming to.
That's item 4 that
3
you're
was just the approval of the minutes of the last meeting.
I beg your pardon.
No problem.
All right, thank you.
I will call that item,
Thank you so much.
and that is hearing on the merits, Ray Alpha Buie, Treasurer, and the African American Democratic Club, SFEC number 13-131112. And Ms. Bloom, do you want to just outline the complaint, and then I will take testimony from you, Ms. Buie.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, Malad Daljou from the Oakland Ethics Commission is here to represent staff in this hearing, because it involves the presentation of evidence, and he's barred in California, so he's been kind enough to come over.
Okay.
So I'll ask Mr. Daljou to present ethics staff's case.
We weren't sure that.
Stand before the microphone.
Sure that the respondent was going to be here. So as far as the process goes, did you want me to present our hearing, and then the respondent will have an opportunity to respond to it or make any kind of statements?
Yeah, you each have 10 minutes, and then Ms. Buie will have an opportunity for her presentation after yours. Malad.
Good evening, Commissioners. Malad Daljou here, representing the San Francisco Ethics Commission enforcement staff. As you know, in the matter of Alpha Buie, here to just present the enforcement staff's brief. Just as a little bit of background, the African American Democratic Club is a general purpose committee that was active in 2011 and 2012. In 2014, the enforcement staff had opened up a case and found that there was 3 failures to file semi-annual statements for 2012 and 2013. Commission staff reached out to the respondent, and when I say respondent, I mean Ms. Buie here, and also the committee that she is the treasurer for. There was some communication back and forth between commission staff and the respondent. Unfortunately, the semi-annual statements, the delinquent semi-annual statements, were never filed, and then the staff wasn't able to reach out to the respondent anymore. Since then, Commission hasn't been talking to respondent. They've attempted to resolve this matter, and in 2014, because the matter they weren't able to resolve the matter with the respondent, a probable cause hearing was held by the Commission. The Commission found probable cause that the respondent did, in fact, fail to file the 3 semi-annual statements. An accusation was issued by the Commission for those 3 failures, and that's what the brief here today is about. The respondent in this matter was served with this brief back in December, and also with notice that this hearing would be held today. The relevant statutes were also served on respondent, and she was given the opportunity to submit any evidence to the Commission staff for this matter, and also to respond to the brief. Until now, the Commission staff did not receive any evidence or response brief or any other type of communications from respondent. Based on the evidence that was issued or that was submitted to the Commission in the brief, we recommend that the Commission find that respondent did fail to file 3 semi-annual statements, and that the Commission issue a $1,000 fine for each failure to file a semi-annual statement, and also that the Commission order that either the committee or the respondent file some type of paperwork indicating what the status of the committee is right now. Whether one of the issues was whether the respondent in this matter was still the treasurer. In order for her not to be the treasurer, the state law requires that she file a Form 410, the FPPC file Form 10, which would delegate the power of the treasurer to somebody else. If the committee is no longer active, if they would like to terminate the committee so that these semi-annual statements don't continue to be due, they can file a terminating 410, but it would require them to file the semi-annual statements all the way up until the date that they indicate in the 410 that the committee was active till. I have one matter I'd like to address with the brief. Unfortunately, In the brief, we have both Ms. Buie and the African American Democratic Club as the respondents. The probable cause and the accusation that was issued by the commission only applied to Ms. Buie as the respondent, and therefore I'd like to strike the African American Democratic Club from the recommendation by staff for these violations. And happy to answer any questions about that particular issue.
Doesn't the club have an obligation to file the termination statement?
The committee has, if they've terminated, they do have the obligation, but all filing obligations by the committee, the treasurer and the principal officer is also liable for any failure to file campaign statements, including Form 410 to terminate.
Any commissioners have any questions?
I'd like to hear Ms. Bowie's testimony, obviously, and ask her a question or two.
Thank you.
Ms. Buie?
Good evening once again. I'm Alpha Buie, and thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to come and speak. First of all, going back to 2012, during that time, I was asked to turn over the books. Now, the only thing that I'm probably guilty of is not being aware that I needed to file this form that he spoke of to remove my name from being the treasurer. There was a period of time when the African American Democratic Club, went from the time I was asked to hand over the books to the incumbents, there was a period of time at that point in time between that moment and the time that they actually had the election, which I haven't had time to go through because I'm going through some stuff with a whole bunch of water damage in my home and displaced and a lot of madness going on in my personal life right now. So a lot of this I haven't been able to address, but there was this period of time. And so when I contacted, upon first being made aware that these filings needed to take place, I contacted Mr. St. Croix, and he was on the phone with me for, we probably spent an hour on the phone trying to get the records from the Wells Fargo Bank where we had done business with in our banking so that I could reconcile these records and then file the reports that needed to be filed. At that point, Wells Fargo told Mr. St. Croix and I at that time that they had no record. They couldn't go back and find the records. So I asked Mr. St. Croix, who signed on one of these things, what am I to do at this point? He says, well, I don't know what you can do if Wells Fargo can't give you the records. And at that point in time, like I said, I handed over the books in 2012. The reason I know it was 2012 because I was also running a phone banking campaign for President Obama at that time for him to get reelected. So I had my mom traveling back and forth from San Francisco to Memphis, Tennessee to check on a very ill mom, running a phone bank. When they asked for the books, I gladly hand them over. So what I really was trying to do, and I've called, this gentleman indicated that I didn't contact anybody. I called the Ethics Commission, Mr. St. Croix, and a couple of other people in there, just trying to figure out in this length of time, what can I do to make this go away? What can I file? I don't have what you say you need. I haven't been the treasurer. I haven't been involved with the African American Democratic Club really since 2012. So all I wanted to know was, what do you need me to do to make this go away forever and not come back? And nobody has responded to me from the time I got the first one till now. And at the time that I got the first one, had I not been going over to my house where I can't live and checking my mail and picking up stuff, I would not even have known this because I haven't been able to live in my home where my mail has been going to since May 2016, based on a whole bunch of other damage that's going on. So whatever I can do to make it go away, I'm here today because that's what I would like to do, is to be able to get rid of this once and for all. But I don't feel in any way, shape, form, or fashion that I should be penalized. I certainly don't have $3,000 to give anybody for something that I'm totally not responsible for. Even if I were responsible for it, at this point in time in my life, I don't have $3,000.
Commissioner Kopp.
What took so long for you to appear? This has been on our calendar, what, 2 times before today?
You know, when I actually read through it, I did see something that said if I wanted to respond, if I wanted to file something, and I did call somebody, and they said that I didn't have to appear earlier. So I wasn't.
Well, the form notice does say you don't have to appear.
And so when I got this, when I got the
If I'm
second
going to
one,
face a fine, I'm going to appear.
when I
Anyway.
got the second one, the second thing, then I'm like, okay, it's not. I'm not. It's not going to go away, is what I said. And then I saw Mr. St. Croix's name at the top of it, and I really felt like, well, maybe I don't, because he was the person who was on the phone with me to Wells Fargo for over an hour. So I was really surprised to get this and see that his name was up there when he was on the phone and with me to try to get records or to try to direct me as to what I needed to do.
When did the club end its activities?
That I really don't know. But as I said, I did not have any real involvement after 2012.
After
and
2012.
Yeah, 2012. And the reason I didn't have any real involvement after that, as I said, I was running the phone banking. And then from that, I was back and forth from San Francisco to Memphis, Tennessee, where I was caring for my mom, who later passed away. And so I was not trying to keep up with what was happening with the club. I was trying to keep up with what was happening with my mother. And unfortunately, I didn't bring that. I had it in my car, but I even brought that funeral thing just to show you that this actually happened, and I'm not standing before you just to say, okay, here's this. I had some real-life crises that I needed to deal with, and I couldn't be here dealing with that.
As far as you know, does the club still exist and is active?
You know, I don't know. All I know is that the person that I last know who came in as the vice president, I did get just a text message from her about this, just saying, you need to handle this. So I don't know what I have not in any way been involved. Since
How did you initially get involved with the club?
I initially got involved with the club because I really wanted to have a voice in what was happening in the local politics, and in terms of being able to hear what people's platforms were, and to just be able to be a person of that had some kind of input and stood up for something in terms of trying to make my community a bit better. And it should be known, I mean, not only am I a responsible citizen, I'm a San Francisco peace officer. I don't go around ignoring and not obeying the law. And I have been since 1989, I have been. So I am not a person who walks around and just takes things so lightly. My plate during this time, when this was very, very full, as it is overflowing right now, it is overflowing. And yeah, I just, as I said, with everything that I've got going, I really am here because I would like this to go away.
Well, one of the problems is that the club has not terminated insofar as the Ethics Commission record shows. Can you shed any light on why that hasn't occurred?
No, I really,
Let
there
me
was a-
ask it another way.
Okay.
Who was the president or the
when,
leader?
and when the 2013, the election, which was supposed to take place in 2012, the 2013 election, I think it actually took place in 2013. I went back and found an email to that effect, but I didn't bring that in today. But that email suggests that the election actually took place in 2013, and at that time, Mr. Carl Williams would have been the president, and Joe Elias Jackson would have been the vice president.
Either of them here tonight?
No.
Hmm?
No.
No? Anybody else you can tell us who was an officer besides them and you?
The only other person that's here this evening is former outgoing, he was the outgoing president in 2012, and that's Mr. Charles Spencer, and he's here.
Got a question to somebody on the staff. How did we get rid of a organization if it no longer functions and nobody appears to sign documents to terminate it?
Ms. Buie continues to be the treasurer, so she continues to be responsible under the Campaign Finance Reform Ordinance, so she can file a termination statement.
I know she can, but nobody's doing anything.
Right, right. So if
Can't we do something and say you're no longer recognized?
we don't have that power, but that is something
Right.
that's on our list of things to add to CFRO, actually.
Okay.
Sir, if I may, I just want to be clear. What is it that, if there's something that I write, if there's something I say, if there's
Yeah,
something
you
I
fill
file,
out a form.
I fill out a form.
You terminate. But if you're not
What's the form?
treasurer anymore,
Fill out the
raise
form
a
and
legal
terminate it.
I may be
Question.
wrong, and the staff can correct me, but I think one of the problems is when you file a terminating, you have to say, have no funds, or if you have funds, what you've done with them. You've got to have a statement, a financial statement about
Yeah.
it. And that's what I understand she's saying, the problem they had to initially to try and get Wells Fargo to cooperate. She says Wells Fargo didn't cooperate.
Right.
And I share your frustration. I mean, it just seems like that we have a number of these cases where the party being charged is told you've got to do X, and they don't do it, and we penalize them every 6 months because they didn't do it. It just seems to me there's got to be some way to not keep running up the fines to get it closed.
Chair Rennie, may I ask a question? Paul? Yeah. Ms. Buie, can you go back to the discussion you had with Wells Fargo along with Director St. Croix and shed a little more information on what you were asking for and what they were not able to provide, and then what Director St. Croix's advice to you was?
Yes, I'm real clear. What I was asking for is I had bank account numbers from when we had accounts during the time that I was actively acting in the capacity of the treasurer. And during that time, when I was calling to get that, and one of the things that let me back this up a little bit just so that I'm real clear on why. When I was not acting in the capacity of the treasurer, there were the whole books and all the binders and stuff that I had. There was another person during that election when they asked me to turn the books in that was transferred to. And if I had brought that box with that stuff, I could show you the box where it was shipped back from the person was out of state who was elected as a treasurer. That box was shipped back to me with all that. I still have that stuff in that box where it was shipped back to me. But in the meantime, this time that you're speaking of had already passed, so it was already delinquent, so I didn't have anything. So with the information that I had for the old bank accounts, I was asking Wells Fargo to give me bank statements so that I could go back over the bank statements for the period in question. If I could go back over the bank statement and get the bank statement, then I could reconcile from the statements that they have to see what was spent, what, if anything, was taken in and deposited. And Wells Fargo, along with Director St. Croix, on the line with me, said that they had no record of these accounts. So when we were on the phone, like as I said, approximately an hour, he sat on the phone with me, and they, from one person to another person to another person to another person, and they still said that they had no record of these accounts.
So then, as far as you know, you do not have, and Wells Fargo does not have, any records of the accounts for the African American Democratic Club for the time in question.
The time in question, yes. The only Wells Fargo statements that I have them in a binder, which I didn't bring to, which was up to the period when I was no longer acting in that capacity of the treasurer. So that's all I had was what I had shipped off and what came back to me in a box. And I didn't have anything else. Other than the only thing else that I got was communication from the Ethics Commission. I hadn't gotten anything since then.
So then after your conversation with Wells Fargo, with Director St. Croix, and they indicated they don't have any of this information regarding the accounts or the account statements, what was his advice to you?
He says, well, if you can't get the statements, I really don't know what you can do. He says, because you need to be able to show what the balance that you're showing, I guess the cash balance that I showed in the last statement that I filed, what happened with that money. And I said, I don't know. I wasn't going to just make up something and put on there. So I didn't know.
Okay. Thank you.
When you had the, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Ms. Buie, in regard to that box with those materials in it, did that show the existence of a Wells Fargo account and checks and numbers or a number of an account on there?
Yeah, and I had those when I called them. And that if I had brought that box, in that I created a binder, a zip binder, and everything that came to me when I was acting in the capacity of the treasurer, everything that from filings to statements to everything is categorized by the month when I was acting in that capacity.
So you had materials that indicated account such and such exists at the time that you and Mr. St. Croix were on the phone with Wells Fargo, and you're telling them this is the account, and they're saying the account, we don't know anything?
Those accounts are no longer in existence. Mind you, it had probably been 8 or 9 months by that time since there was any activity on there. So what they had done is closed out the account, and what I needed them to do was go back, like whether they kept it on a Laserfish or whatever they kept it on, is go back, even though they had closed them out, and go back and get me copies of whatever they had up to the point that they closed the account out.
Well, I'm a little confused. Did Wells Fargo tell you and Mr. St. Croix they didn't know anything about any such account?
No, they didn't say they didn't know anything about the account because I had the account numbers.
Yeah.
They just said that they no longer had any records pertaining to the accounts.
Huh.
Those accounts were no longer in existence. They didn't have any records pertaining to those accounts.
Okay.
All right, so I wonder if you could just, on the calendar, clarify some things for me. So you were treasurer of the local African American Democratic Club in 2012.
Mm-hmm.
What was your period as treasurer?
I think I had it from probably 2011 through 2000. Let me see if I filed it. At least 2011 to 2012.
All right, so you were treasurer for 1 year. Is that correct?
I may have been it longer. I'm sure it was 2000. Yeah, I see that I filed something 2011, 2012. 2011 is when I took it over. looks like the first one I filed here, it's in your package because I didn't bring any of the documents that I have. Like the first one I filed was in 2011, so I would have been doing it 2011 through 2012.
So it is during that period where you did not file these forms and where you accumulated this debt of fines that you did, of forms that you didn't file and therefore have been fined during that period. Is that correct?
No. I did file from 2011, for 2011, 2012. So the period that I didn't file is after the period that I was no longer. See, I'm looking at where I filed right here in your packet.
Okay. Well, who succeeded you as treasurer?
The person who succeeded me was Sunsari, I can't remember her last name. And I don't remember her last name because, as I said, once I was no longer active in that capacity, I was not active with the organization. And I was not active because I was running a phone bank for the president, and I was taking care of my mother in another state. So I wasn't trying to know.
Is this club still active as a political club in San Francisco at this time?
I have no idea what they're doing. I just know that I have not been active since 2012. 1,000 things could have happened since 2012. I don't know.
Okay, so for me, I mean, as I listen to this, it seems to me that, number one, I don't know how well we train entities of this nature in terms of what they have to file and what they have to do, and do they understand the kinds of fees that are going to be applied to them as fines if they don't comply with either with the dates in which they have to file information. And otherwise, it's just this morass of people. Nobody takes responsibility. Nobody knows what's going on. And I don't understand why Wells Fargo wouldn't have records of that bank account. That, to me, is completely bizarre. But I'm just completely at a loss as to what's going on here and how we are going to resolve this.
Well, Ms. Buie, you at one point went to somebody at the Ethics Commission to say that you were no longer treasurer.
Exactly.
And you were told, were you not, at that time, that you had to get something from the club saying that you had been relieved as treasurer before the Ethics Commission and its staff could treat you as no longer the treasurer, because that's the way it was originally when the committee was set up. You were identified as the treasurer. And they wanted you to get something from the committee telling us that you were no longer treasurer. Why didn't you do that?
No one ever told me that I needed to do that until all of this stuff came up. No one has ever. Had I ever known that I needed to file something, report something to say that I was not, and that's the first thing I think that I said when I came up here. The one and only thing that I'm guilty of is not knowing that I needed to file whatever it was to remove my name from being a treasurer. I did not realize that I had to file any kind of paperwork to remove my name. Now, somewhere in some old emails, I have some emails that say that the election took place, and the election actually took place in early 2013, and it lists who the incoming officers were in 2013. But I don't have that with me this evening.
Mr. Chairman.
And what I would like, I would like an opportunity to submit that information to you, and whatever else it is that's in that box that you need to see. I would like an opportunity to submit that to you.
All right. I'm going to sum up what it looks like to me. But first, Charles Spencer was the president in 2011, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in 2012 as well, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Know if he is still the president?
I know he's not the president.
Not the president. All right, then, Ms. Elias Jackson was president by 2014. Is that correct?
She may, you know what, in 2013, I know she became the vice president. Now, I don't know if she actually became the president. She may have at some point, but I didn't have any contact with her or the African American Democratic Club.
All right, well, if you read one of the documents attached to the file, this is from J.O. Jackson, dated August 22, 2014.
Is that in this packet that I have? This is in this.
Huh?
What page is that on?
It's Exhibit 6.
Exhibit 6?
I haven't
Let me go to
responded, been given all these documents?
Yeah, she's looking through them.
All right. In there, it states that you met on July 1, 2014 with Garrett Chatfield, who was, I don't know, an investigator or something with the commission, and indicated to him with documents that the committee's documents were forwarded to a new treasurer.
Mm-hmm.
Remember the name of that new treasurer?
Sunsuri, gosh, I can't remember her last name. Sunsuri something.
Anyway, and you assertedly agreed that you would attempt to get the bank statements, that's Wells Fargo, to determine how the committee used the balance of $5,216.51 to file the Form 4 City to terminate. And then on August 11, 2014, Ms. Alliance Jackson, identified as the president, contacted Mr. Chatfield. Mr. Chatfield met with her on August 22nd, 2014, went through these issues, and nothing happened. You're still on the hook, so to speak, because on the public record, you're still the treasurer, which makes you a respondent. The club is the other respondent. Now it's recommended that because of a technical omission, the club be deleted as the respondent, which leaves you as the remaining respondent. And as far as the record shows me, it leaves about $5,213 or something in a bank account somewhere. In the meantime, it's probably eaten up about $100,000 of staff and taxpayer time and money to go through this. Do you know of any other individual in or out of the club who could provide information on its current status?
I really don't.
Don't?
I really don't. As I said, I have actually, honestly, had, sir, so much chaos in my life with having lived in a hotel for 4 months after water damage to my home, then in an apartment, and trying to make sure that I get asbestos and mold and everything else out of my home. My life is the last thing that has been on my mind, other than this right here, has been the African American Democratic Club. I've just been trying to bring some peace in my own personal life.
I'm curious, is there anybody else here who's a member of this club? All right. I desist.
Any response that you want to make?
No, I was just here if the commission
You got to speak in the mic.
I don't have any comments unless the commissioners have some questions for me.
Why did you arrive at $1,000 per violation?
So when you look at, I'm happy to let staff respond on that if they'd like to, but either way, what do you think, Jessica?
Yeah, I can. Looking at past fines for this type of violation, when folks entered into stipulations, the penalty was about $500 per violation. But we felt that since the case had to go to a hearing, that we at least would double that. But we did try to make it as reasonable as possible from our perspective, because we did have some information to indicate these mitigating circumstances. So we did not think the maximum penalty was appropriate, and that's why we recommended $1,000 per violation.
Any other comment or questions by Commissioner?
So just another question to staff to make sure that the only way to terminate the committee would be to file the Form 460. There's no other way to terminate the committee?
It's a Form 410, but yes.
410,
and I mean, I think that as a practical matter, the commission could probably, and maybe Josh can opine on this, but the commission could probably accept a letter from Ms. Buie that the bank accounts are closed and there's no way to account for the money that shows on their last Form 460 in conjunction with that Form 410 to finalize the case. I would be willing to accept that. Is that okay? Yeah.
Well, the problem with that, though, is that how can she sign such a letter when she doesn't have any idea whether there's still $5,000 or whether the $5,000 was pilfered off by someone?
It sounds like from her conversation with Wells Fargo that the account is closed, which means there's no money in it. She doesn't know how it was spent, but we at least know the account's closed.
That the account is closed.
It sounds like there's no record of it existing past the year she was treasurer, so I would assume that the account she had control over is closed.
I can't hear you. Can you talk on that mic?
I'm sorry. The accounts that I had control of and that I had any connections with, they have been closed for years.
And if the African American Democratic Club started conducting any activity after the closure of the club through the termination statement, then we'd have another enforcement action against the new committee for not formulating correctly.
When you were treasurer and the account did exist, were you the one signing the checks that the club would expend for various things?
Yes, I was.
Okay. Was anyone else authorized to sign the checks besides you?
The president, Mr. Charles Spencer, he was.
Okay. So one would assume then, in regard to that 5,300 or whatever it is, was in the account at some point. Did you write any checks on those amounts?
You know, when we had elections, and that's why I don't ever recall there being 5,000 left in there. When we had, when there was ever a politician running or anything like that, we paid for ads. We paid to have copy people to print out these door knockers that you put on people's doors, and we gave some kids stipends to pass out these things. So usually we were always in the hole, but according to the dates that the cutoff fell on, if I filed it according to the cutoff dates for the monies that was taken in and the monies that was spent, then oftentimes it looked like there was money, but in essence the money was gone. But it's just that the checks came in or the checks went out after a lot of times the cutoff date or the termination date for when I should account for it. So it was always on the statements. It was may have looked like there was, but within a week or so after I filed, coming up to the next time to file the next statement, then that cleared out the next money. but there was never any money left over for anybody to do anything with. Was money we were always in the hole for something.
Well, did you ever see a balance on an account of $5,000 in any of the materials that were sent to you as treasurer?
Not really on a bank account.
Well, on anything. I mean, did you ever see any kind of document sent to you by Wells Fargo that said, okay, Ms. Buie, the treasurer of this,
No,
in this account, which you are the signatory of, there's now $5,000, or any kind of statement you remember seeing?
Not a statement, not with a balance of that amount. What I probably remember seeing is if we took in a check for $5,000, it would show that there would have been a deposit, but on that same statement, the money would have gone out almost as fast as it came in. So the statement would have shown the deposit of whatever amount it was. If that was $5,000, it would have shown that deposit. But then immediately from that $5,000 would have been the withdrawals and checks, the money that was spent. So it would not be a balance ever of $5,000. I don't know if that made good sense, but...
No, that's all right. I'm just trying to, in listening to the discussions earlier, there was I can't remember whether the statement, was it your statement that it was shown at some point that the club had an account with $5,000 in it?
It's the last Form 460 shows $5,216.
Exhibit 3 in the brief has a Form 460, and it's the very last Form 60 that was filed for that committee.
Okay.
And it was filed by Ms. Buie.
Yeah.
It was received on October 25th, 2012, a week before the election.
Okay.
And it shows $5,000 and some change left in the committee's funds.
So Ms. Buie filed that and said, we've got $5,000 in this account.
Yes, it's the exact amount is $5,216.51, and that was for the October 1st through 20th, 2012 period.
And that was filed on October 25th, 2012, and then Ms. Buie, you resigned in November 2012, so a month later. This gentleman?
You want me to find that for you?
Yes,
I'm happy to. Yeah, of course.
Because I'm looking here.
Yeah. So
I will
just
call
give me
for
a
public
moment.
comment in a moment. Thank you.
So this is for the October 1st through October 20th, and that's the ending cash balance there, and that was filed on.
Mr. Chairman, I have in mind, let's see, how would we accomplish this? Writing a letter to Wells Fargo, asking for a history of this account, asking, A, does it exist? B, if not, Wells Fargo will come back that, that's not permitted by law, but I'd like to see what Wells Fargo does. And maybe the city attorney can figure out some way we can get. I'm sure you'd consent to it, but I don't know if you have standing to consent.
I'm not sure, though, that would be germane to the issue here, and that is whether there should have been a filing
It's
to
clear.
close it up.
Yeah, it's clear there should have been. But
And,
what are you going to do?
I guess before I call for public comment, does anybody want to make a motion either to accept the staff's recommendation or reject it or some other alternative?
I'll make a motion to accept it, but I want to include the club, and he says that we can't do it.
I have an issue with, are we going to discuss the staff's recommendation?
Pardon me?
Are we going to discuss the staff's recommendation now or no?
Well,
Or want
we
to-
got a motion, I'll call for public comment.
Okay.
Is that motion seconded?
No, I'm not going to
I'll
say.
second it.
All right. So, any commissioners want to comment on the motion?
What is the motion?
Whether or not we should accept the staff's recommendation
Yeah,
and impose the find the violation and impose the $3,000 fine?
Yes, my view is that I think the $1,000 per violation is excessive. I think that during her time as treasurer, Ms. Buie discharged her responsibilities in filing the Form 60s as required. The last one was on October 25th, 2012, and then she resigned thereafter and believed that she did not have any further responsibility as the treasurer, so therefore didn't file any additional statements. And then when contacted by the staff in 2014, I believe it was, I think she worked in good faith with Executive Director Croy to resolve this issue. And then when she was told by the director, I don't know what you can do, she didn't take any further action until now when she received the information and has come here and has said very clearly, I want to make this go away, and I'm here to take responsibility for it. And that the amount in question, $5,000 in a committee that only raised $13,000, I believe, in total, and was intended to do campaign outreach and, as Ms. Buie said, in order to make further contributions to the community and to have a say in what's happening in our political life. I think that I commend her for coming in here after so long to take responsibility for this, and she's the last one standing, it seems like, based on her testimony. And so I would find that $1,000 is just disproportionate to the actions that she has taken and the gravity of the violations that have occurred here. I think our commission has considered violations of larger dollar amount and also with much more sophisticated players. And so I think that the punishment really does need to fit the crime here, and that I think to your point, my fellow commissioner's point about how much, I think it was Commissioner Han who said, how do we educate people to know what their obligations are when undertaking these responsibilities? I think that there's a lot of room for improvement there, based on the facts of this case and the outcome. And I think piling on with a $3,000 fine doesn't serve that purpose. So I would recommend and would feel comfortable, observing the letter of the law with a $1 per violation.
You're proposing to amend the motion.
Yes.
Reduce the fine to $1?
Yes, per violation.
Any, Commissioner Han?
The only comment I want to add to this, I totally agree with what Commissioner Chu just expressed, but the problem for me, at least, is twofold. One at the beginning, where I question how we educate people, especially small groups. I mean, we're here to see that there is ethical conduct in the raising of money particularly in elections. And the very big groups are very sophisticated and know how to deal with all of this. And then you have this massive of groups, small groups, have no idea what they're doing, very unsophisticated treasurers. Not an excuse, but we need to make sure that they know what they have to do prior to beginning these groups or these efforts. At the other end, we have this problem with not enough staff, not enough personnel at the Ethics Commission to deal with things, with these issues in a timely manner. I mean, this is 2017. I mean, this woman barely, if I am to believe you, barely remembers who was in the African American Democratic Club at that time. These things need to be resolved quickly and efficaciously, and we don't have a record of that. Now, that may not be anybody's fault, but then I also question what kind of advice the executive director of the Ethics Commission was giving Ms. Buie back in 2012. This, to me, is just, this is not what we should be spending our time on. There are far more serious violations and issues that we need to spend time on. This is not one of them. And yes, fine, I'm all for, fine or $1 for each thing. This whole thing, for me, is ridiculous and embarrassing.
Call for public comment.
Hi, my name is Charles Spencer. I was president of the African American Democratic Club when...
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
My name is Charles Spencer. I was president of
You're Mr. Spencer.
Right. And so I was president of the African American Democratic Club during the period that Alpha Buie was treasurer. She was treasurer. Best of my knowledge, she administered her role in a way that made me feel comfortable. We had an election. We handed off all the financial information, P.O. Box keys, Facebook, Twitter, email, website passwords, handed off everything. I expected the Wells Fargo account information would have been handed off and taken care of in a similar manner as the website. I had a couple of follow-up meetings with the subsequent president and vice president. We discussed strategies, priorities, and I assumed that anything that needed to be taken care of would have been taken care of with the new president and the vice president. I am at least a little bit concerned that Alpha Buie is being held responsible for not filing for the club's obligation when I would have expected the subsequent president and vice president to take care of the filings. And that's the comment that I wanted to make.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Commissioner Kopp.
Who are they?
It's Carl Williams and Joe Jackson.
Pardon me?
Carl Williams and Joe Jackson. Yes.
I have a question. In terms of the group's fundraising,
Yes.
How did you fundraise and from whom?
We would fundraise from members, and our primary financial activity would be to prepare slate cards. So we would fundraise with candidates, prepare and disseminate slate cards, mail them, put them on car windows. We pretty much never had a net free and clear balance of $5,000. We were pretty much zero all the time.
So most of that money, $5,000 or whatever the amount was money that the members contributed.
That's correct.
Well, let me ask you this. Is there any explanation as one of the investigative documents indicates that the committee had raised about $9,200. I think it was the year 2012, that January 1 to October, whatever it was, 20. Had spent over $13,500. Does that ring a bell with you?
I can't tell you the exact balance, but I know that, again, during each election cycle, we would go out to candidates and members to raise money, and our primary expenditure would be the slate cards. And we would use spotlight printing and, other than a P.O. box and website domain name, we didn't have a lot of...
You know if the club still exists?
I do not know. I know that a couple of years ago, and I can't give you a date, Joe Jackson was trying to organize the club. I don't know at that time if she was still president or vice president, but no, I do not know if the club still exists.
You know whether or not, you know any of the people who were officers after you, you know them today, so you could say to them, why don't you go down to the Ethics Commission and file a statement terminating the club?
I have a telephone and email address as of a couple of years ago. I will do that tomorrow. I'll call them and send them an email.
Williams and
Right.
Ms. Jackson.
That's correct.
Do it tonight.
Jackson.
Okay. I'll do it tonight.
All right. Any other public comment before we vote on this? Did you have a question?
Good evening. Am I on? Good evening, David Pilpel. Had a couple of comments on this matter. 4 things specifically. The woman referred to as Joe Elias Jackson, I met her several years ago. At the time, I believe she was a city employee. She may still be. So perhaps some outreach could be done to her through the city to determine her status and if she has any information that might help in this matter. The second point, the Exhibit 1 of the packet indicates that the 410 filing was an initial statement. The first 460, Exhibit 2, doesn't list the ID number, but the second 460, Exhibit 3, lists ID number 981476 for the committee. That suggests to me that this was either mishandled by the Secretary of State or there's something else to this story, because an ID number starting in 98 would suggest that the committee was initially formed in 1998 under the previous numbering system, and that either the initial filing was for a new organization that should have been issued a different number, or this was actually treated as an amendment to a prior statement of organization, Form 410, with that ID number. So I'm not sure about the history of the organization, but it triggered a question in my mind about, or based on that ID number. The next point is I didn't hear anything about outreach to the FPPC and how they would handle a similar matter involving non-termination of an entity when there's missing files or some disarray in the record keeping. I would suspect that over the 40-plus years history of the FPPC that they've dealt with lots of enforcement matters, including disarray and paperwork, and they might have some suggestions or a protocol for how termination can occur if there isn't a responsible officer who can file the terminating 410. And just finally, I think I heard from a couple of commissioners that training for entities like this, general purpose recipient committees, really is needed. That I think we have a good system for training treasurers and other officers for ballot measure committees, for candidate committees, but these entities, GPRCs, that are otherwise known as PACs, it's difficult because you've got a lot of volunteers and a lot of turnover, and perhaps some additional effort in training and resources to do that through the Commission would be helpful. They also mentioned slate mailer activity. Slate mailer organizations, or SMOs, are regulated under state law and not under local law, so there's some confusion there and often some confusion in filing those statements. Hope that's helpful. Thanks.
Any other public comment? No.
There may be other public comment.
Any other public comment? Commissioner Kopp?
Yeah, that's a good thread of an idea, but Ms. Pelham must know. How are the situations like this handled? Los Angeles or elsewhere? Now you're on the board of governors of this famous organization.
So this case was, I was as frustrated as you all are with the circumstances, and so I did reach out to the FPPC and learned and read their current administrative termination regulation, which allows the FPPC to administratively terminate committees who are non-responsive filers with activity below $3,000. I also reviewed their proposed regulation that would increase that amount to $5,000. So non-responsive filers with $5,000 in their bank accounts or less. And I reached out to the Enforcement Division to discuss the new regulation with them and express support, and to ask them how we can refer our non-responsive filers to them to be administratively terminated by the state. And we are working on that right now. It's assigned to one of our staff members, Johnny Hosey, to go through and refer all of the non-responsive filers who meet the criteria for administrative termination. And then I thought, why not give our commission that authority as well? And so that's something that's on our list of amendments that we would like to add to CFRO, to give you the authority to administratively terminate a committee that meets certain criteria, so that this type of situation doesn't happen again. As it is right now, we just don't have a really good option, because these are strict liability violations. As a staff, we can't really make decisions about just letting things go. That authority will come as we bring policies to you that give us some authority to let things go. But right now, we don't have those policies in place, which is why it's before you.
All right. Do you, Commissioner Kopp, you were the author of the amendment which Ms. Chu proposed amending our accepting, but reducing the fine to $1 or to $3.
No, that's Commissioner Chu.
That was my amendment.
Your amendment,
Yes.
I'm saying, but you have the original motion.
Mine is the original motion.
And you don't accept her amendment. All right. All right, I will call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Oh,
Wait, what were we voting on?
calling on the motion.
On the amended motion?
The motion without her amendment.
Motion.
Without,
On
In
the
other words,
amended
that to
Motion
accept-
without the amendment.
right, in other words, that to accept
you
the staff
voting no?
recommendation and to impose a fine of $3,000.
Yeah, I don't understand why Commissioner Kopp is voting no then on his own motion.
Oh, I thought it was, you're calling.
Your motion.
vote
Your
on
motion.
The original
Yeah.
motion.
Motion,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
My vote is aye.
Right, okay.
And mine is no.
no.
Right, so the original motion does not carry. Does anyone want to make another motion?
Yeah, I would move to amend the staff's recommendation to, to reduce the fine to, again, $1 per violation for a total of $3.
So that the motion is that you would find that there was a violation,
Yes.
but impose a penalty of $1 for each violation. Do I hear a second?
Second.
I will call for public comment on the amended motion. Hearing none, I will call the question. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried 5-0, that the commission finds there's been a violation but imposes a fine of $1 per violation or $3.
Okay, I just want to be clear on what I need to do other than pay $3. Do I need to file Form 410 and 460? Do I do that and then pay $3? Is that what I do? Okay.
Well, that raises the legal question if you're not treasurer.
If you're no longer treasurer,
Okay. So then,
counsel?
okay.
Why can't we
I just want to be clear. Okay.
extinguish this entity?
Okay. So then
She
I
just
have
wants
to.
clear instructions.
Yes, I want to be
Legally, she's still the treasurer because the
Yes.
committee has not filed a 410. Therefore, she can still file all the campaign statements for the committee. So if you file a 410, which I can give you a copy of
Okay.
when we step out.
We say all. I don't know
Can't do that.
all.
She doesn't have records.
Okay, so just a 410,
Okay.
which is a terminating,
Okay.
and then you can put in there like the date that you believe it was terminated,
Okay.
and then you have to file a 460,
Okay.
the 460s for up until the date that it's terminated.
Okay. Okay.
Okay, and I can talk to you more about it if you'd like
Okay.
and help you with that.
Excuse me, Mr.
Thank you
Chairman,
all so
through the
very
staff.
much. Thank you.
How can she do that? She's no longer an officer. She hasn't been affiliated since
2012.
2012. She doesn't know if there's money in another bank account.
I'm sorry. The reason that we just found her in violation is because legally she still is the treasurer, and so we found 3
Oh, all
violations
right,
for
all right.
$1 each.
Thank you for
so she can
reminding
terminate the
me.
committee if she would like.
And she can, I mean, she's still obligated to work with whoever was around the committee, who was in charge of the committee at the time it was terminated in order to file accurate statements. And if she can't find the information or she can't produce the documentation, we can accept a letter of explanation for that. So she just needs to carry out her obligations to conclusion and file the Form 410 and then pay the $3.
Okay.
All right, hopefully the staff will work with her to get
thank you
that
very much.
accomplished.
Yeah, let me.
Turning now to item 5, which is presentation and discussion from the Bureau of Delinquent Revenues about its collection process status of the Ethics Commission referrals.
Yes, thank you. Commissioners, this presentation is in response to Judge Kopp's request last month for more information about how the Bureau of Delinquent Revenues operates and for an opportunity to have specific questions about our cases answered. 3 individuals from the Bureau of Delinquent Revenues have come tonight to present that information to you, and I'll let them introduce themselves and explain a little bit about their role.
Thank you very much and welcome.
Yes,
And
thank you. And thank you for
sorry
having
that,
us.
You had to sit for a while, but
Very interesting case to listen to, so that was cool. My name is Jeff Smeichel. I'm one of the assistant directors for the Bureau of Delinquent Revenue. This is Sheila Robledo. She's one of our collection supervisors and supervises the collectors who handle the collections on the Ethics Commission debts. And we're also here with our policy and legislation manager, Amanda Freed, who you probably already know.
welcome.
So I promise to keep this short and respect your time and give basically a high-level overview of the collection services that we provide on your cases and try to address any questions that you may have about the work that we do. So really briefly, the Bureau of Delinquent Revenue, being the official collection agency for the city and county, has multiple departments who refer delinquent accounts over to us. The general criteria that we follow with those referrals is the accounts typically have to age to 90 days of delinquency. And typically after that 90th day, we will have that department notify the debtor of the referral over to our Office for Debt Collection, which most already do on their letter or email communications. And then once we receive them, for your particular cases, since we don't have a very large inventory at this point in time, we manually enter them into our collection system and do our immediate collection follow-up process. Normally, upon the accounts being referred to us, letters are automatically generated by our collection system. So normally within the first 3 to 5 days, they're already getting a letter from us welcoming them to the club. And we do all of our initial collection reviews. So the collectors will also, if we have a phone number available, emails available, they will try to initiate contact right away with the debtor. Normally, after the first letter goes out, we'll get a response most of the time, and we'll try to get them to pay the entire amount in full. If they're unable to pay the entire amount, we normally try to probe and try to find out specifically why they're unable to pay the full amount, and then continue to do our collection efforts, including setting up payment arrangements or giving them extensions on whenever they can pay the entire amount. In many cases, we also get bad address information, like some of the information that you may have could be old. It could be from 6 months, a year ago. So we'll also do some skip tracing if that's needed. And then we also add them to our auto dialer. So we dial, and that's part of what Sheila does. We dial on these accounts all day, so from 8 a.m. through 7 p.m. in the evening. For people who have not responded to our initial welcome to the club, we will send out a firm final notice that contains stronger language as far as the actions that we can take if they are not compliant. So for debtors who are not compliant, we do advise that we can refer them to a collection agency if the balances are not large value, but still pursuable. Or for cases where they are higher balances that are owed, or there's a higher propensity to pay in the event that we choose to take them to court. So in many of the cases for Ethics Commission, we do end up taking them to court. The general, I guess I'd say the general guideline that we follow as far as value is concerned is we typically like to look at cases that are $1,000 or greater. So these cases will receive a more in-depth review by the collectors. We will pull their employment information, property that may be owned, any information that we can find on assets. And that review is pretty much done extensively throughout the course of our collection process, from the very beginning of when we're making phone calls and sending out letters up until whatever the resolution for that debt might be. So for candidates that are qualified, let's say they owe $2,000 on a bill, and we find that the person is gainfully employed and or owns property or runs a business in the city, we will send them a demand to advise them that our intent is to sue them. If they don't comply, we normally give them 10 additional days to respond to that demand. And if they fail to do so, the collectors are extensively trained. So they are trained to file the case at small claims court, and will handle the entirety of the process. So from making sure that the debtor is served, appearing at the hearings. We try to do negotiations even at the hearings. So sometimes if debtors try to avoid having a judgment entered against their record, because once the judgment's obtained against them, it becomes a matter of public record, could affect their credit reports, that can hit them in a number of other ways. They tend to be pretty compliant there. If not, our goal is to obtain the judgment. So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yes, so typically, I may have missed this, how long is it from the time that you initiate collection proceedings against a debtor to the time that you would file in small claims court?
Normally, we'll try to do that within the first 6 months.
First 6 months, okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we'll do what we can to try to work with them and make multiple efforts to contact. We do what we call sloppy payers. So you have some folks who you'll get a hold of them, we're on a payment arrangement, but they are a few days late, or they may miss a month and make it up the following month. We'll work with people who are working with us. But for those who are not compliant, normally within the first 6 months, we're looking to obtain a judgment to enforce it. So once we've obtained the judgment and the appeal period has passed, the collectors are also trained to perform post-judgment work. So the main criteria that we need to have for any cases that we choose to take to court, there has to be an ability to pay. There has to be a method to enforce the collection of a judgment. So we're looking for, if we find that there's employment information, our first action is going to be doing a wage garnishment against them. If we receive any payments from them via check, we'll be looking to levy their bank account. And in most of these cases, we do find that at the very least, if we don't have enough employment information and there's not enough information to kind of give us a clear picture of what their finances look like, we do file the abstracts of judgment, and we'll record that abstract of judgment in typically in San Francisco, but we'll also look to see if they own any property in any other counties and have the abstract recorded there as well. So our goal being that even though many of these cases may not pay right away up front, in the event that they try to go into an escrow transaction because they're buying a property or they're refinancing, that lien will show up waving at them, and we will do what we can to collect on the lien through the escrow process. And most of the time we're able to collect on debts that way. For large balance cases, so where they may owe, let's say, $25,000 or greater, and they do have assets, we will work with we have attorneys within our office that we'll work with to file a civil action against them. So, and a similar review process happens on our end. So normally they want to see all of the activity that we've done up to the point of the referral to our legal section team. What information have we found that makes it clear that this particular candidate, this particular debtor is a good candidate for legal action at that level. And then from there, they will also do post-judgment enforcement efforts as well to collect on the judgments. The judgments are good for 10 years, and we will renew them twice, so for a total of 30 years. So we're not going away anytime soon. We try to pursue them as much as we possibly can. Sometimes you can't find information on them immediately, and you may not be able to enforce the collection right away, but over the course of that time, we will continue to make efforts periodically to progress the collection efforts on those cases. In addition to that, we also have quite a few of these cases that are city employees. So if they are city employees, we will do offsets against their controllers offset against their wages. Other points to make, we do have also cases to where if they're uncollectible. So these are cases in which we've already kind of hit the wall with our research. There's no property, there is no employment, they don't have a business. We've made 6-7 passes of reviews over the course of a couple of years, and we're not finding anything on them. So for cases like that, especially for ones that may be low value, if they're only a few $100s, those cases are just not going to fully be able to be pursued. It wouldn't be cost effective to continue to pursue them. We also have some cases where they may file for bankruptcy. And in the event that they file for bankruptcy, we also have another team within the group that handles all bankruptcy proof of claim filings, and they'll handle the entire proceedings for the bankruptcy depending on which chapter the debtor has filed. So that includes if we're going to do a reorg and we're going be able to get installments from whatever assets may be in the trust account, or if the debtor, in many cases they file for Chapter 7 because there are no assets, and we're just basically having to wait for the debt to be discharged. So once the court says that that's the case, that will terminate our collection efforts at that point in time. For debtors who are deceased, we also will file, we do the research to see if they have any probate that's a estate, and if they have a probate case open, and the collectors are also trained to file creditor claims in the probate proceedings and try to collect through the probate as well. That's very high level, so forgive me if I wasn't detailed enough. But do you guys have any questions for me?
Commissioner Kopp?
Did I hear you mention orders of examination?
Yes. So I didn't mention it here, but I did mention it to Jessica in our discussion. So we
didn't see it in the agenda report on it. Anyway, we've got a case we acted on last October, November. What was it, about $75,000 penalty? And I'm just puzzled. Why wouldn't you use an order of examination of the judgment?
So if we've obtained a judgment against them, an order of examination is an option for us to pursue. I want to say the last case that we got for that size was a real recent transfer. I want to say, I think in the last few weeks, maybe 2-3 weeks. So it has not reached the stage of a judgment just yet. We're still in the initial contact phase, if we're talking about the same case that I'm thinking of.
When a matter is presented to you for collection from an agency, whether it's the General Hospital or the Ethics Commission or what it is, what involvement, if any, do you expect from the agency who's referred the matter to you?
Normally, we do have a liaison or a contact within the departments, the referring department that we will work with. So periodically, we will still check in to see, if you received an email address, did you receive a mailing address or any recent phone number information, or if they made any payments to you, a copy of a check. So we will still collaborate with that department to get updates that may help progress the collection effort.
But how about negotiating a settlement, some settlement? Does the agency who referred the matter to you have to approve the settlement?
It depends on the nature of our MOU with them. So some deferring departments, like the hospital, for example, they give us full authority to settle on those obligations as we deem appropriate. And then we have some clients that we will consult and get their approval on all of the settlement negotiations that we do.
Any commissioners have any other questions? And thank you very much.
Actually,
go ahead.
Are you prepared to take specific questions on the outstanding matters that have been referred to BDR from the Commission?
I'm hoping so.
In the matter of the committee to elect Norman for supervisor and Bob Squarey for District 7, Isabel Urbano and Chris Jackson. So 2 are from 2015, and the latter 2 are from 2016. Have you filed in small claims for these matters, since it's been more than 6 months since the matters were referred to you?
Okay, so for Chris Jackson, yes. So we have 3 different obligations in total for him. One that was assigned to us in 2011 and one that was assigned to us in 2013. Both of those have judgments against them and have liens filed for those obligations.
Okay.
The third one was referred to us in September of 2016, and that one is not yet sued just yet. So we have communications out to him and doing our normal collection process, and we'll be looking to sue him probably within the next few months if he's not responsive.
I'm sorry, that was which matter? Isabel Urbano? Or?
That was Chris Jackson.
Chris Jackson. Okay.
Isabel Urbano, as of right now, our main difficulty with her is finding good contact information.
Okay.
So right now we haven't had any success finding a viable address, viable phone numbers to initiate contact, so we won't be able to sue until we can achieve that. Bob Squarey is pending asset review, so we've sent him notices. Have not located good phone number contact for him just yet, and he's currently under asset review. So before we'd have the collectors commit to taking a legal action against him, we want to make sure that they've found something, so we make sure it's cost effective for us to take that action.
And then the committee to elect Norman for supervisor?
Is this Jacqueline Norman?
Yes.
Okay. This one is also under asset review, so we have notices that have already went out. We have collection calls that have been made, but as of today, we have not found assets for her just yet.
I see. The committee to elect Norman for supervisor?
Mm-hmm.
Any public comment?
Thank you.
Thank you guys for your time. Appreciate it. Right.
Thank you. Don't leave yet.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Larry Bush for Friends of Ethics. On occasion, the Commission will accept a stipulation for a payment over a period of time. I think you had Julia Ellis, I believe, for a payment of $500 a month for a period of time. But I never have seen in any of the subsequent reports whether those payments are being regularly made. So I would like it if in future, when those kinds of arrangements are made, that the report will show if that's being paid down as the agreement was made. Thank you.
Yeah.
David Pilpel again, and I agree with Larry's comment. I think that's very well taken. It would be good to follow up with those stipulations and payment plans. I just wanted to comment further on the Chris Jackson referral matter. I heard from the BDR staff just now that they have 3 different items related to Mr. Jackson. I only see on the chart at page 4 of Jessica's report for item 10, 2 items. So perhaps they broke it up into 3, but it would be nice if the 2 staffs had similar dates and all that. My understanding is that Mr. Jackson just ran this past November for school board in Oakland and is currently a resident of Oakland. So I don't know if that helps or hurts their ability to discover his assets and attach anything. I have nothing personal against him or any of these other actors. I just hope that they would pay up their debts and get out of the doghouse and be back with the rest of us in a better place. And I've talked to staff before about having a larger way to figure out who has fines, forms, fees, et cetera, that are overdue or have other outstanding obligations to the Commission, and find some way to sort of tag all those people so that we can publicize them, maybe encourage folks to contact the Commission, provide the funds or forms or whatever is outstanding, and get out of that bad place. So perhaps we'll have a larger discussion of that when we get to enforcement. But I appreciate that we've now heard from BDR more about their process, because it has been a bit of a mystery for some of us until this time. And it's good that we've got better communication between the Commission and the BDR and Treasurer's Office staff. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Ace Washington, better known here in City Hall as Ace on the case. This is my first time coming before this commission, but I've been doing my research and reading a lot about this agency and understanding, and I see that you guys seem on your case. And the reason why I said I came before this Ethics Commission some 5 years ago, and the dates that y'all was just talking about the about the African American Democratic Party. I mean, you had Charles Spencer back there. Y'all didn't question him. But the deal is, I'm just trying to get some information here. And I know I've been to a lot of commissioners' meetings, and the agendas I'm very familiar with, but this long agenda, it seems as if I'm going to have to be here to the 12th item. But I want to express my 2 minutes left here. I am African American, as you know, see here, but I just like to identify myself. I was on the out-migration task force. I am the czar of the out-migration. I'm 63 years old. I got generations. I got kids that got kids, and their kids got kids. But my question is to this commission. I will be coming back, I guess, another date, or if I could do it here, to ask for some help from you on some discrepancies in my community, which is the Fillmore. I call it the Fill, no more. The out-migration, some issues that's going on. I was surprised to see Charles Walker and some other people here. And I'm trying to find out what is the function of this junction, what you really do. Are you really have backbone now that you're going to go after when people come up here and make some complaints about some commissioners and other issues here? I'm not really, how could I put it this way? I'm not really sure what this ethics commission is really. I know what ethics is about. I know we need some change in here at City Hall. Y'all call it City Hall. I call it Silly Hall. You know, I've been around for about 20-something years. I never came to this meeting. And I just want to compliment Quentin Kopp. I know he's one of those persons that's no nonsense, and he's going to put some credibility to this commission here. What I really was coming to find out, I read somewhere last year where his first case was wanting to find out what the mayor's doing, Ed Lee. That's what I like to know, because it seems like Ed Lee don't have no problem doing anything in the city and county, and no one wants to bring him up against any charges. I've seen some things happen in 2012 with elections with some people I'm not going to mention right now that I know personally. But I just want to know if this ethics commission is going to be from A to Z up and down City Hall here to make sure that the ethics and things that's been going on for a number of years be corrected. Because I'm going to be watching. I'm ace on the case. I'm back now. And so I'll wait for other time to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Turning to, again, I thank the people who came over from the Bureau of Delinquent Revenues, and good luck. Continue with the good work. Turning to item number 6, that matter will be continued to the regular meeting in February due to some health issues and a request for rehearing by the plaintiff because of his failure to get notification. It's enabled him to appear at the earlier.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
David Pilpel, I just wanted to point out in one of the attachments, the Exhibit 1 to the Warney item, there's an email from Jessica that says to Mr. Warney, our response to your request for rehearing is attached to this email, and I couldn't find it in the packet. So perhaps the packet for next month can include the staff's response to the rehearing request. That would be helpful. Thank you.
You'll note that, Jessica?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Turning to item 7, discussion and possible action on a proposed enforcement policy for investigation, suspension, and parallel proceedings. And Ms. Pelham, you want to address that?
You want to, me? Okay. Thank you, Chair. I'll take it. So in the past couple of meetings, Judge Kopp has requested some discussion of a policy to potentially refrain from indefinite suspension of our administrative investigations while district attorney or city attorney investigations proceed. That effectively is a request for parallel prosecutions, so that the Ethics Commission would proceed on a track that is parallel to a district attorney or a city attorney investigation and not concurrently. There's a lot of excellent policy reasons for doing that. The most important, I think, are preservation of evidence and freshness in minds of memories for witnesses. and also just to prevent the staleness of investigations that we are seeing when the district attorney retains an investigation and prevents, or at least requests, that the Ethics Commission stand down on their investigation for long periods of time, sometimes multiple years. And so Judge Kopp had suggested a period of 90 days for an Ethics Commission suspension of investigation at the request of the district attorney or city attorney. We considered that time frame. I think that's a good time frame. The district attorney should be able to get off on a good start for his investigation during that period of time, and so we would support that suggestion by Judge Kopp, and we set forth the policy reasons and justifications for that, along with the proposed policy for your consideration today.
Any discussion among the commission? Commissioner Kopp?
I refer to page 4 of the report and the specific language under the heading Ethics Commission Investigation Suspension Policy. And I have one addition on item 1, which now reads, at the city attorney or district attorney's request, staff will suspend its administrative investigation for 90 calendar days, and I recommend adding, and then resume such investigation, period. Secondly, in the following unnumbered paragraph, starting with the words, the executive director reserves the right to decline any request. I ask other commission members here, and of course the director and Ms. Blum, anybody else who wants to offer an opinion on it. The executive director and or commission, which raised the question of whether the commission has such authority. If it does, then I would recommend that amendment to add those words. If it doesn't, then that's the end of my suggestion.
Good. Okay. Yeah, the commission doesn't have the authority to initiate an investigation, so you're not informed when an investigation suspension is requested. So I don't think that I don't think as a practical,
it would be feasible. Then.
Right.
I'm sorry, I'm not following here.
Well, I would recommend, if it's both legal and it's feasible, practical, the executive committee and or the commission reserves the right to decline any request to suspend an investigation.
Okay, but we're not saying that Commissioner Kopp's original observation that, as to number 1, that we should add the language, will suspend its administrative investigation for 90 days, add the language, and will then resume the investigation. We're not saying that that's inappropriate. Oh, okay. All right.
It's
okay.
the second.
I got it. I got it. Oh, that's fine.
Chair
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I had a question. Is there a definition of good cause?
No, it'd just be the general standard that's applied as a term of art, like, if we have reason, like an example of good cause, maybe if we have reason to believe that an employee is about to quit and their emails might go away or something like that. Just generally, we can imagine circumstances that would justify declining a request to suspend an investigation.
Okay, thank you.
We didn't want to make it absolute.
Mr. Kopp?
Thought occurs. First paragraph on page 4, you refer to the fact that that staff continue negotiating with city attorney and district attorney to develop strong parallel proceeding practices. And on that point, you're going to let us in on how those discussions are going?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I will include updates in the enforcement report, and if you would like to be briefed more often than that, feel free to call me personally.
Okay.
The idea generally is that as our relationship becomes more, built on a trust and a mutual trust, and mutual respect for investigative techniques, that perhaps we would be invited to sit in on interviews, or they could be invited to sit in on our interviews, and information sharing would occur, cognizant of due process and Fourth and Fifth Amendment restrictions, but that basically we could proceed jointly on these investigations, and that no one has to sit on the sidelines. Now, I do mention in the memo that there is sometimes justification, and quite frequently just naturally a criminal proceeding of disposition, like the actual trial would occur before administrative hearing, just through the nature of how criminal proceedings occur in the Speedy Trial Act and things like this. So we do recognize that there are some times when the investigations would have to take a backseat to each other, or I'm sorry, not the investigations, but the actual legal proceedings. But in terms of like these early investigative methodologies of just interviewing witnesses, gathering information, collecting emails or data through subpoenas, this is all types of investigations that can occur parallel. There's no reason to suspend investigations, in our opinion, and we support Judge Kopp's suggestion for this 90-day policy.
Commissioner Keene.
Yeah, I think there's no way to actually articulate it in the language, but there certainly should be a recognition of a couple of realities of the interagency relationships. And that is, for example, district attorney's offices. Someone who's a line prosecutor who's involved in investigating something is almost by nature going to say, no, don't get in my way. Your agency should stay out of it. And I think recognition of that should be important, and I'm sure will be, by the executive director in terms of the fact that, no, we have a whole different set of criteria and priorities. You're proceeding upon the fact that if you determine you can't prove something beyond a reasonable doubt, you're going to stop. Whereas we may well be able to prove something far beyond a preponderance, and we've established our case. So there should be, I think just to shorten this, there should be a lack of deference to those agencies. I mean, there should be professionalism and all that, but the idea that, I think particularly in the past, there was not just deference, there was just sort of, they've told us to not do anything, so that's the end of it. That state of mind should not exist, and you should take a critical look at these matters every time you get a request from either the district attorney or the city attorney that, no, it's important that we stay out of it. Because I think in most situations, they do it reflexively and without thought. Just one person's opinion there.
The one thought I had, though, to the amendment that you wanted to make to paragraph numbered 1, it would make it mandatory that the staff would have to commence or continue its investigation at the end of 90 days. And there may be circumstances where in the judgment either of the commission, if it came to us, or to the executive director, that we ought not to be immediately proceeding. In other words, the 90 days is our sort of default, but there may be good cause why we don't want to. And I just wondered if we shouldn't just say, and assume it's investigation unless the commissioner, the ED commission, or the ED decides otherwise. So it's a default position, but it gives us that flexibility.
That's acceptable.
Yeah.
So add unless the executive director determines otherwise? Okay.
Or commission. I'm prepared, Mr. Chairman, at the appropriate time to make a motion to adopt the recommended suspension policy. And I associate myself with Commissioner Keene's prior remarks.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right.
Commissioners.
Ask for public comment. Any commissioners want any comment?
Commissioners, may I just make a point as well for your just additional consideration and discussion? I think one of the balances we're trying to reflect in the language is the way the enforcement process and investigative process and authority is structured under our existing laws. And part of that is a balance of the commission has a role to adjudicate matters, but doesn't actually have a role in directing investigations. There's a very strong oversight role that you need to have to make sure we're doing our job appropriately. But I would suggest that the language, the recommendation you just made, it isn't in alignment with the language I think that we have in the charter and in our ordinances about how we go about investigations, that it probably shouldn't refer to commission, but refer to the executive director. And then you continue to use your oversight role to make sure that we're doing this policy, carrying it out appropriately.
I'll accept that.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I stated that that's certainly acceptable, but I reflect on the fact that you've got a 10-day period of time before the DA or the city attorney says, suspend, we're going in. I mean, what do you do in 10 days? I don't think, as a practical matter, you're going to have done much in 10 days. That's why I said, and maybe resume isn't even the right word, or proceed with such investigation.
And Commissioner Kopp, I'm not suggesting changing that at all. I'm just suggesting that the language not refer to the commission.
Because the commission is prohibited
but we would
from
support
certain
the
preliminary
presumption
acts.
idea.
Okay. All right, I'll subside.
Any public comment?
Larry Bush for Friends of Ethics. 2 points. The recommendation number 2 deals with the FPPC, but I didn't see any real discussion of the FPPC in the body of the report. Had this been in place, we might not have had the problem that we did with a recent case that lost its ability to move forward because of timeliness. So I'm glad to see this. It's also true, in my understanding, that the FPPC's action and enforcement doesn't match in every respect what the San Francisco law has, that we can take action simultaneously because we have more authority in some cases. For example, money laundering is really a separate San Francisco offense, even though it's also a state offense, but you have a separate thing to do. On the first thing of resuming after 90 days, I'm immediately reminded of the fact that the district attorney filed charges in February against several members of the commission or staff of the Human Rights Commission over illegal acts that would be illegal under the jurisdiction of the Ethics Commission. And that's been 11 months. And there's been no action that we've seen during that period of time. Undoubtedly, they are busily compiling their case, but the public hasn't seen it. And I don't know how long it will go on, but it seems to me that at some point the Ethics Commission has a role to step in and say, we're expecting some action, or we're going to be undertaking the part of the action that relates to our authority as an Ethics Commissioner.
Well, Mr. Chairman, to reply to that, but does number 2 bar us from proceeding in that, or number one, bar us from proceeding in that kind of a situation? You're saying it's 11 months, the case hasn't gone to trial, and we're sitting here and doing nothing, and who knows, there'll be another continuance, et cetera, et cetera. That doesn't stop us, though, from taking that into consideration. The executive director says we're going to proceed to the extent we can. You're not going to get anything out of the defendants, but maybe other avenues of investigation that can be done. So I'm asking you your opinion. Do you think number one prohibits that from happening?
No, I do not.
Okay.
I think that, in fact, it prompts me to think that it's time to do it. Thank you.
On the FPPC, I don't know. I haven't dealt with the FPPC in 100 years.
Any other public comment? I'm sorry.
I gather the executive director is satisfied with that language, right?
Yes.
David Pilpel again. A couple of comments. I think this makes a lot of sense. I think this shifts the default to a concurrent investigation rather than sequential, and potentially reduces some of the problems or potential problems that we've seen or might see. I agree with Leanne's comments about the jurisdiction of the executive director, and that it's really in her, or his or her, orbit to determine how to proceed with this particular phase of an investigation, and that the Commission retains jurisdiction for overall oversight of the enforcement program, but has specific roles at later stages of enforcement. It also occurs to me maybe either adding language or just having a practice that the executive director shall report to the Commission any time when this suspension policy is implemented, so that you're aware that there was a request for a delay, and that you're just informed that the executive director has chosen for good cause to implement that delay. That seems appropriate to me. I don't know if you want to codify it. And then just the final point, without referring to a specific investigation, I think this language, as you've amended it, should be either codified into the procedures for handling investigations, or just exist as a standalone policy and be posted to the website, so that there is knowledge that this is the new practice going forward. It may not make a lot of sense to anyone who doesn't otherwise understand the procedures of the Commission, but it certainly is a worthwhile endeavor, and all are to be congratulated for their contributions to it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ace Washington again. You know, I'm just sitting back trying to feel what this commission is and how the process is, and see if it goes like the rest of the commissioners' meetings. So I guess I can speak now. Talking about investigations and suspension of investigation. And I just talked to the gentleman from Oakland, because I didn't know he was from Oakland, but he informed me that I should talk to you afterwards. Now, I'm not sure if I'm going to be here to look like this is going to go on to after 8, so I'm going to speak my piece. Now, I'm interested in next time, and I guess on the 4th Tuesday it is, coming back with some evidence, and also complaining and requesting that this commission look into some the city's commissioners, like, for instance, first let me just start off by this. As I said before, I'm the czar of the outmigration. I don't know if y'all know anything about the African outmigration. Our population has gone down to less than 3-4%, and the budget has gone up to billions of dollars. When Newsom was here, when he put this committee together, we were in a $500 million deficit. So all the recommendations and everything that we had put forth in that report just went blank. And all the department heads, they have not report to no one. And in the last it's been 10 years since the outmigration. Now, Newsom, I think he's going to run for governor. I know he's going to be one, but I'm going to be knocking on his door. But now this commission here, I'm going to request that y'all open the investigation, or find out how I can do it, into the Human Rights Commission. Now, this outmigration was turned over to Ed Lee turned it over to the Human Rights Commission, which he used to be a director, which I worked closely with him. I know Ed Lee real good. Ed Lee knows me. But since he's been in office, he won't sit down and talk to me. But yet the budget, he's put monies for every other segment of the city and county, but not for the African American community. So he's in violation. And I'm going to come to this commission to help me put them on track again. I go to the Board of Supervisors, which London Breed is the president. Well, she was on that committee, too. I'm not going to say nothing bad about her, but she's the president now. But I'm going to try to put her in line, too, and put together a reunion so we can find out what is going on with that. Now, I don't know if I got only a few more seconds here, but I will get up to speak a little bit longer when I get a chance. But right now, I'm just very concerned about my issues on what do I do to file whatever papers I need. I would like to open up some investigations on the OEWD, OCII, the Human Rights Commission, San Francisco Housing Authority, because of this new RAD. I would like to invite, whenever Trump put down the new director of HUD, to come here to find out what they're doing with the RAD. So I got 8 seconds here, but my primary objective is here dealing with the African American community, specifically.
Move.
It moved, I believe.
As amended.
Seconded by Commissioner
In doing
King.
that, I make the comment apropos of one of the points that I'm sure Ms. Pelham will let us know in her report. You give us a report every month, so you'll have a space in there for that.
All right, I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. Turning to agenda item 8, it's a presentation and discussion on the new Ethics Commission website and planned outreach activities.
Stephen Massey.
You want to go ahead?
Stephen Massey. I'm the Electronic Disclosure and Data Analysis Manager. And for those of you that were on the Commission in 2015, you may recall that I gave a presentation about a new vision for the Commission's website. And I'm pleased to announce that we did launch the new website on December 21st of last year. I'm hoping we can get the presentation up on the television. Perhaps you could call... Oh, there we go. Okay. So the new website is really a complete rethinking of the way users interact with our site. We wanted to make the site more user-friendly and more user-centric. As far as the homepage, we wanted users to be presented with relevant content that's pertinent to the particular filing season or election that's going on, rather than bombarding them with all the potential services and offerings on our website. And so just to reflect on where we've come from, this is our website as it was in 2005 when I started, and was pulled down in 2009. It's hard to see there, but there are a number of choices on the screen. It pretty much represents all of the potential services we had at that period of time. And what we found is users would go to the site and they would be lost in the sea of links as far as which section pertained to them. And during a particular filing season, the most pertinent links were not really brought to their attention. They just had a choice of all of our services. Now, in 2009, we replaced the website with the Department of Technology, and we did reduce the number of choices on the website, but over time, our mandates have changed. We brought on new regulated areas such as permit consultants, major developers, expenditure lobbyists, and we've tacked all that onto the existing website. And also the way people file statements has changed. Back in 2009, most forms were filed in paper format. Most people downloaded the compliance information in paper manuals that could be printed. And now most users file their statements electronically. They pay their registration fees or late fees electronically online, and they can even sign their campaign statements electronically. So that has all been tacked on to the existing website as well, and it's become disorganized and somewhat difficult to use. So in December, we replaced the website. Unfortunately, it's difficult to see on this screen. You may be able to see it better on your monitors. But I just want to focus on really the top section of the page, because that's what most people would see when they pull up the website on their screens. They wouldn't see the entire website all at once. So this is the main section of the homepage that would appear on most people's monitors, and there's a great reduction in the number of choices on the screen. At the top here, we reduced the number of sections on the site to just 5. There's the commission section, where we have all the information about the activities going on at the commission level. We have a new compliance section. This is to try and educate those in the regulated community about the actual actions that they need to take to comply with the law. We have a new disclosure section. This is targeted towards the public who are consuming the disclosure statements that are being filed with our office. We have an enforcement section that where people can go to file a complaint or learn about the activities of the enforcement division. We have a laws section where you can learn about the pertinent local laws that apply to the commission and research advice letters. And then on every page, we have added a new e-file button where you can go to log into your account to file statements. You can pay fees or sign your campaign statements electronically. Now, the main focal point on the page is this banner section. And this is what the website looked like on December 21st when we launched it. But what we plan to use this section for is really to draw attention to the most relevant information for this period of time. So it may be difficult to read on the screen there, but the banner on the homepage right now is targeted at users who need to file their final semi-annual statement, which is due on January 31st, to close out the activity for the campaign for when they are active during the election. And so that's why the banner there is the campaign's over, but disclosure is not, meaning that you still have disclosure obligations even after the election has ended. There is a Learn More button, and you can click there, and it tells you what you need to do to comply with that January 31st deadline. And so over time, we will change this banner depending on the filing season. For instance, you can imagine that before the Form 700 filings are due on the April 1st deadline, that we will have a banner that is targeted at those users so that people do not have to hunt and peck around the website to find the most relevant content. We have also added 4 links at the bottom to target our most frequently used services. The old website didn't really have very much information on actually requesting advice from the Commission. So we've added a section here to get guidance from the Commission, whether it's informal advice or formal advice, and we discuss how to request that. We have a section here for e-filers to set up an account, to register as a lobbyist or a new Form 700 filer, to open a new campaign committee, to log into their accounts to file, and to finish up and sign their campaign statements. We have a button here which says View Disclosures. As you may recall, there were changes made to the Campaign Finance Reform Ordinance that requires campaigns that send out mailers to put a disclaimer on the mailer that says that you can view financial disclosures at sfethics.org. So I wanted to make sure that that language was literally on the homepage to find that disclosure information, whether it's in the financial statements or in any of our data formats. And finally, we also wanted to provide a more obvious File a Complaint button on the homepage. The complaint section on the previous website was really lacking. So now we have a new complaint section, and I'll go over that in a few minutes. Another thing that's changed about the users who come to our website since 2009, in 2009, most users used a desktop computer. According to our statistics, no users had mobile phones who were accessing our site. At this point, 1 in 10 users are actually using a mobile phone to consume the content on our website. And so if you pull up our previous website on a mobile phone. What it will do is it will scale the website, which is designed primarily for a computer with a maybe 15 to 17-inch monitor, down to about a 4-inch size. And so it becomes completely unreadable. So what we've done is the site is now designed to scale the content to an appropriate font size and interface depending on the type of device you're using, whether it's a mobile phone or a tablet, all the way up to a very large screen. We have actually imported all the content from the previous website. There were about 4,500 pages of content on our old website that have been brought in. We've reorganized it and rewritten a lot of the content. We have also added new sections to the site. Related to the Commission's activities, we have added a section on our budget requests that we made last year and that we will be making going forward. We have a new policy issues section. That is a page that will be maintained by our new policy staff. It's really targeted at making the public more aware of the different policy discussions that are going on at the Commission level. One thing that I've become aware of over time is sometimes when the Commission has a policy discussion that spans multiple meetings, sometimes folks come in late to the discussion and they want to get up to speed on the current status of that policy discussion. What are the relevant documents? What's the current proposal? And going back and researching prior agendas and minutes is very time consuming. So we want to put all the relevant documents on that policy page and get someone up to speed quickly so that they can participate in the discussions at the Commission level. We've also added a staff page. So there's no mystery now as far as what everyone's role is at the Commission. There's an organization chart there. We have listed everyone's working titles and email addresses for all the staff. So if you need to contact a particular person, that is now listed on the website. We have a new complaints section, which I'll talk about in a minute. And we've also added a new compliance process walkthroughs. So before, we had these printable manuals that could be downloaded on our website. Now we've come up with a more standard template for how to proceed with going through start to finish for any of the different disclosure processes. So for instance, for lobbyists, there's information about how to register, how to pay your fees, how to comply with the filing requirements, and then how to terminate as a lobbyist. And following that, what happens if you're audited, or what happens if an enforcement action is brought against you. So we documented this for each of the different types of regulated entities that file with our office. We also have reorganized the disclosure section on our website. Back in 2009, when our previous website was put up, most users came to the website and downloaded the PDF versions of basically paper financial statements. And now there's different types of users who access our content in very different ways. Some people still access the more traditional financial statements, but other people also will download our content in spreadsheet formats and various data formats. They may also be sort of the citizen programmer or researcher who makes actual queries into our databases and uses an application programming interface. So we've documented each of those sections and will be continuing to work on that section of the site over the course of the next year. One of the requests that was made at the last meeting when I initially presented the website was to add a searchable advice letter section. So we've gone about and done that. You can now search all of our past advice letters by category, by law, by section, by date range, and keyword to help you find any relevant advice letters that may have been issued in the past. The site is now being transmitted securely. Before, we only securely transmitted sensitive information such as credit cards or your actual forms that you're filing, but now we've secured all transmissions with our site. There are a number of security benefits to this, but one of the primary ones is that a user who goes to our site and sees that they're on that secure connection knows that they're on the official Ethics Commission website and not a fake website or another website that is mimicking our website content. We've also added new sections to our site to be in compliance with the Language Access Ordinance. So now we have sections for content in Chinese, Spanish, and Filipino. We have translated information about the Commission and our contributor guide into these languages. And as new content is written and resources are made available, we will also be adding that content to those sections as well. Now, going back to the complaints section of the website, on the previous version of the website, if you went to the complaints section, you could download the form to file a complaint, and then you could also download the Ethics Commission regulations for investigations and enforcement proceedings, which is about a 20-page document of regulations about the process that a complainant can go through to file the complaint and what happens after that. And it's a confusing document. The first page of that document just goes over definitions, defining what city means, what credible means, what day means. And it's not the most user-friendly document to get through. So we approached UC Hastings, and some of their students there were tasked with drafting a plain language version of these enforcement regulations. And we took that document that they worked on, and we made some additional improvements to it, and we've posted that to the website. So we now have a new section on filing a complaint, which goes over general information about filing a complaint, what types of complaints can be filed with our office, and then also does sort of a deep dive. It's hard to see here, but there is a submenu here where it talks about what is involved in preparing a complaint. What happens when you submit the complaint? What happens after you submit the complaint? What happens during an investigation? What happens during a settlement or a probable cause hearing? And hopefully that will demystify the process for some folks. Some of the feedback that we've received over time is that sometimes people are confused after they file a complaint what their role is as being the complainant and what exactly is supposed to happen after the complaint's been filed. So hopefully this will help before complaints are filed, and if it doesn't, at the bottom of the page there is a button here. I'm just going to zoom in on that section. It says, "Was this page helpful?" And there's a button to provide feedback to the Commission. And if you click that, a form will appear, and you can provide feedback about that particular page. When staff receives that feedback, we will know what page that you were looking at when you provided the feedback, so we can provide very targeted improvements to the site. Just in the past month since we've had the site up, we have received both critical feedback and positive feedback. We've also received feedback via our social media pages. Some of the positive feedback we received, hallelujah, motto, ethics on the move, love the site, so easy to use on mobile, much improved website as part of the reboot of the Ethics Commission. But I also want to talk about some of the critical feedback we've received. So, for instance, on the commissioner's page that we put up, someone wrote in and said they felt it was less helpful than the page that we had before. There was no chart of appointing authorities and terms. The user has to scroll to find all that information. On our lobbyist disclosure page, someone said he couldn't figure out how to view the actual filed reports, found the links to be confusing. On the home page, someone commented that they wanted us to list the upcoming meetings rather than just listing past meetings. So these are actually very targeted feedback that we can look at that page, and if we start seeing a lot of feedback about a particular issue, we can prioritize it and start to make improvements to that section. And so at this point, the website project is not done. It is a project that will always be under continuous improvement. We'd like to incorporate a lot of community feedback through a variety of different methods. And so this year, we're really blessed to have a senior fellow working on our staff. Gayatri Tikandil is been added to our staff through the Senior Fellow Program, and she's going to be working exclusively on the website until next October. Already in the past few months, she's really brought a lot of new ideas and energy into this website project, and so I'd like to give her a moment to talk about the things that she's going to be working on the website through next October.
Thank you, Stephen. Good evening, Commissioners. I want to provide a brief update on the different initiatives that I'm working on. Yes, we have it presented. Over the last few months, I've been working with the staff to learn more about the programs that we administer and also the online tools that we make available to filers and public. Based on our current priorities, we have identified 3 key areas that I can work on in the upcoming months. The first one is Form 700. We're currently working on preparing for outreach and training to support the filers as a part of our upcoming annual filing deadline. And in that process, I'm looking at our online content on the website, our communication strategy, as well as guidance materials. So I'll be looking at ways to redesign the content to make sure that our filers and filing officers are able to find the information they need to comply with the filing requirements. The second area that I'll be working on is data disclosures. We have a lot of data available on our site, but then sometimes it can be challenging to understand and interpret the data. So I'm going to be looking at understanding the user needs, identifying different types of user groups who consume our data, and look at ways in which we can supplement our data with additional documentation and content that will help them better understand the data, so make it more readily available and easy to use. The third area is continuous improvement of our website. As Stephen mentioned earlier in his presentation, we have a feedback option embedded within every page on our site. So I'm going to be actively looking at comments and suggestions that we receive, prioritize them, evaluate them, and figure out how we can incorporate them within our site. In addition to that, I'm also working with COIT, Committee on Information Technology, to participate in a test program that they're working on right now. It's called Public Voice Program, and I can go a little bit more deeper into that on the next slide. So this is a COIT initiative to bring together city agencies and local partners to facilitate users' testing session wherein local residents can provide feedback on city services and websites. We're really excited that they have selected Ethics Commission website as an initial demonstration candidate to conduct user testing sessions. And right now we're working with a few local partners, civic makers. They are in a local organization in the civic innovation space. They'll be coordinating the program logistics and management to conduct the user testing session. Lighthouse for the Blind is an organization that provides accessibility services. They'll be providing us some guidance on how we can make our site more accessible for persons with different abilities. We're also working with Microsoft. They're going to be providing us technology support to support the user testing program. To give some more context on what the user testing session is, just to give you an idea, what we're trying to do is reach out to a wide range of public members in the communities with different backgrounds, different digital skills, and different understanding of local government, and get them to sign up to participate for testing sessions. And we're going to be conducting the sessions in our San Francisco local library. We'll identify certain test scenarios that they can perform on the site. And the test facilitators will gather their feedback and get the comments on their experience navigating through their site and provide all that information to us. We can then look at all the feedback and test results and identify improvements to the site, to various sections on the site, and hopefully that will make it a better experience for the community at large. Apart from this, we're also looking at our website accessibility. So accessibility is ensuring that our content is accessible to differently abled persons. And as a part of our launch, we did some accessibility testing. We've also taken into consideration different things that we need to provide, different types of support we need to provide for accessibility, such as support for screen readers, making sure that the content is displayed in a visual manner that will be easy for people to consume. We are also going to be getting a professional consultation with Lighthouse for the Blind later this week, wherein we'll have more feedback on how we can improve our site with respect to accessibility. So we're really excited and looking forward to these initiatives and working with local partners and continue to improve our site. So these are the updates on what we're working on right now. And later on, once we have more feedback, we'll come back with more information. So we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any of the commissioners have any questions? I went on the site and I did find it easier to deal with than the old one. I'm sort of a Luddite, so I don't. Much of what you're telling me is wonderful, but Commissioner Keene?
I just think what you've done is very commendable. It's a big improvement on the site, and it's a big improvement on the way the commission is able to facilitate things for the public, and I want to thank you both very much.
I'd like to echo that. I think that that now in 2017, people access information not through paper, but going online and looking things up on the internet. My kids do it. I think we all do it, and that it's really important for us as part of government to be able to keep pace with all of the innovations that are coming out and the accessibility of information literally at your fingertips. So I think the site is a great leap forward from 2009 till now. That's 8 years ago that it was launched and revamped, and so I say thank you, kudos for the hard work, and keep it up.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I particularly like the complaint portion of it. That's great. That's really important.
Thank you for that feedback, Commissioners. It is really notable, I think, from the staff's perspective that this is intended to be a work in progress, and so we're very excited about having our FUSE Executive Fellow, Gayatri, here to lead that effort and outreach. So we're looking forward to getting more feedback about how this site can really speak to how users need it and the ways in which they need it. I think the other observation I would share is that it's also been wonderful for us as a staff to be challenged to start thinking about how we communicate, not in the way we think about delivering services through programmatic channels, but how does the user want to find the information that's most useful to them? So it really is kind of provoking all of us to think fresh about how we convey information and how we need to relay information with this tool that we know is so important. So I did just want to underscore all of our appreciation for the work that Stephen and Gayatri have been leading us through over this last few months. It's been an extraordinary effort, which it started prior to my arrival, so there was also hats off to staff who were here prior to 2016 who did a great job getting it started. So thank you for your comments tonight.
Commissioner Keene?
Yeah, I just want to add one observation as to how much things have changed. It's only about, I think it was about 3 years ago or so, where the suggestion was made that we put all of our materials in the various languages that we have in San Francisco, Spanish and Chinese, and Tagalog and all that. And I remember the executive director being bitterly opposed to that, and being able to get the board at that time, with Commissioner Rennie and myself and Commissioner Hayon, were able to vote that we do that, but somehow that was grudgingly done, and certainly the attitudes relating to the changes and the modernization and something as important as a multilingual city like San Francisco having the material in all those languages, and you just did it automatically. I mean, there was no question in your mind that you were going to do that, and you did. So it's just an observation on the way I think the things are changing quite well.
Did you say you also have it in Chinese? I heard Spanish and Philippine.
We can now support Chinese, Spanish, and Filipino. We have translated some initial content. There was also content that was previously translated that's no longer relevant because those elections have passed. So the information that's currently posted is just information about the commission and the contributor guide, which is really relevant to any election. And as new guides and new information is developed for upcoming elections and new programs, as resources are made available through the budget, we will have those translated as well.
Are you talking about Cantonese?
I think it's more an issue of whether it's traditional or simplified Chinese, and I have to say I don't recall which of the two it is. But
I think San Francisco is primarily Cantonese.
Cantonese is a
a spoken language.
Yeah,
it's the spoken language. It's not the written language.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate all your efforts. Turning to agenda item 9, discussion and possible action on proposed.
I believe we have some public
sorry.
comment, Chair.
I guess I didn't ask for public comment.
I didn't wait for you to ask. I just wanted to suggest a number of changes that make this specifically valuable to Larry Bush as opposed to the general thing. It'd be good if your page would include a link to SF.gov TVs when you have the videos of your commission meetings. It'd be nice to see that link on your page. I'd like to see a one-stop search so that if I were going to follow an action, let's say the Larry Bush Development Corporation has got a development going, and I would be able to put in that entity and follow the lobbying that was done for that entity, where it goes to the board for votes, contributions, any behest payments, gifts, just links the whole thing through so that I can follow the way in which city decisions are being made and each of the steps that they're going through. In that respect, it would be good to include on the commission page links to upcoming board meetings where the commission is providing input. The executive director is mentioning 3 different measures that are pending before the board: Supervisor Farrell, Supervisor Breed, Supervisor Peskin. And I know that there will be input coming from the commission. So if I could go on the commission page and immediately say, here are pending issues at the Board of Supervisors where the Ethics Commission has submitted or is submitting or has scheduled a discussion of those issues, so that I could see those right on. And I'd also like to see links to the enforcement actions taken by other jurisdictions affecting San Francisco. So, for example, when the FPPC finds somebody that's a San Francisco entity, I'd like to be able to see that in one place. And then finally, in that same respect, when other jurisdictions are taking up issues that are going to be relevant to us. For example, the FPPC right now has just announced an IP meeting on rewriting the Cal Access web pages, which are woefully out of date and woefully problematic. But the Cal Access data is certainly important for San Francisco people who are trying to understand the flow of money and all the other issues. So if you would put on your web page something like the upcoming Cal Access IP meeting, just under related relevant information, then that would satisfy me for this month. Thank you.
Thank you.
David Pilpel. I again want to thank Stephen for all of his work on this over the years. I think the last time we talked about this was, September, October of 2015, so it's been more than a year. But thank you, and thank you to the fellow who I haven't met and whose name I would screw up, so I'll just say thank you. I also assume that the website will continue to evolve as the Commission works through its annual policy plan. So as things change, they'll be highlighted, interested persons meetings, draft, right, all kinds of fun stuff. It'll be great. I also assume that, particularly with the translated materials and the disabled user enhancements, that there's coordination with OCEIA and the Mayor's Office on Disability, so that whatever the city standards are for translation and for accessibility are used here, and that we're not sort of doing our own thing. And just finally, to the extent that the staff learns both through feedback and experience what works for the website and for outreach, if that's useful, I hope that would be shared with other city departments, so it's not like you're doing it well and the PUC or the port aren't. If you're doing it well, share it with others, and hopefully everyone can be up to, the high Stephen Massey standard. And I'm encouraged to hear about the Larry Bush Development Corporation. That's a positive development. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and he's not here. Never.
Any other public comment? All right. I've been requested to take a 10-minute break, and we'll come back and complete the agenda.
SF Gov TV, San Francisco Government Television.
we're going to be going back into session.
Agenda item 9, discussion and possible action on proposed Ethics Commission budget framework and recommendations for fiscal 18 and 19.
Yes, we're on now.
Right.
Good evening, Commissioners. Yes, item number 9 is presented to you for your consideration and possible action this evening. It's related to the development of our budget submission, which all departments are required to submit this year, February 21st, to the Mayor's office. I would note that the Commission's next regular meeting is February 27th, and so wanting to make sure that you had an opportunity to weigh in on your policy direction for what our budget submission should look like, I put together a report that reflects the staff's recommendations about where we are at this point in our development of and our progress towards achieving the blueprint for accountability that the Commission embraced last year, and which was ultimately embraced by both the Mayor and the Board of Supervisors in adopting the FY17 budget. And so I wanted to walk through briefly what the key areas are as we see them. And our hope is that this would be a framework with recommendations that the Commission would be supportive of, that would give the direction for me and the staff to prepare the document to submit next month in accordance with the policy direction that you give us this evening. And so that was the purpose of the agenda item. Unlike last year's blueprint for accountability, where we actually had specific dollar amounts, we have estimates of the kinds of proposals we're making in this budget. But we would want to take advantage of some time, and I'll get into that in a few minutes, to make sure that we can round out and make sure that the numbers that we are looking at are as accurate as possible, again, given the policy direction that you give us this evening. So with that, maybe I will walk through just a recap. First of all, last year, when the Commission submitted its budget, I had understood that it was a request for a 2-year budget cycle. As it turns out, we are not on what's called a fixed 2-year budget as a department, unlike some departments are in the city, apparently. And so our office, like many, are now required to submit a budget for the coming fiscal year and FY18 and FY19 together, which in my mind is not a bad thing, because we've had a year of experience at the staff level to really reflect on what our continuing resource needs are and where we best need to apply additional resources in the coming year to continue to try and meet the goals that the Commission established last year, the areas that were intended to guide our work. We've talked about organizational efficiencies, a more effective enforcement program, supporting compliance with stronger information for those who are required to comply with our laws, and a strengthened policy focus. When we look back at the year, we've established a number of key pieces for that blueprint to be further developed. But as this document reflects, we still have some work to do. And so those are the suggestions and the recommendations that I'd like to just highlight for you. The first is that when we look at our recommendations overall, one of the key recommendations that we have is that it's important to align our staff positions and resources with the nature of the work that we actually have to do. What that translates to in specific terms is a request for 2 new positions that I believe are necessary to provide the level of oversight day-to-day of management of our programs in our core education and outreach work, and in our audit programs. I'm proposing that we recommend 2 senior administrative analysts, each of whom would be tasked with overseeing and working with the day-to-day program delivery of our education and our campaign finance, lobbying, and ethics arena, and also to really strengthen our audit program. Next month, we'll be coming back to you with recommendations on how to strengthen the selection process and ultimately our audit for audits of campaigns and lobbyists for the coming cycle. But we realize, and when we do that, we're also looking at delays that we know we need to correct. And so part of this, I think, needs to have additional resources to support the day-to-day management of the program, because what we find is, as we have in many program areas, when we have to have staff multitasking too much, we're not able to focus on the work that they need to do because they've got split responsibilities. And so one of the key areas is recommending that we have that appropriate level of staffing that can actually manage programs. The classification of the positions needs to match the supervisory and programmatic responsibilities they have, and that's not currently what we have. So we've been having some challenges delivering, I think, the services that are core to our function. Secondly, there is, I think it's probably clear to you and many in the room that the Commission has historically had a significant underfunding of the tools and training and staff development resources that, again, the kind of work that we're doing really does require. So this budget framework proposes to change and correct that historic underfunding by starting to recognize through specific line items which have not existed in our budget to date, things like improved outreach, training resources for our staff, ongoing investments that are required in our technology to make sure we can achieve the policy goals that new legislation is proposing to accomplish. So this is an area where technology, we are looking at things like case management software so that we can better track our enforcement cases, that we can better use that information to monitor our own work and to understand where we're coming into pinch points. As we're increasing our staff and going to have more robust investigations and enforcement and more serious cases, we really need to be able to track that information, and spreadsheets are probably not the best way to go about doing that. So we're looking at other jurisdictions like the FPPC, who's just invested in a software program like that, to see where we might be able to find programs that are going to be that will help us. That's, again, getting our work up to the level that it needs to be to do the work that we're required to do. That, for example, is initially estimated to be perhaps a $20,000 one-time cost. In addition, the report notes that there are a variety of policy initiatives that have been either adopted or are being recommended by the Board of Supervisors so far, where there has not been funding in the ordinance, in the legislation, to enable the disclosure requirements to happen in an online setting. We know that technology, or that disclosures are really only as good as the filer's ability to complete the requirement easily, and as ensuring that it's easy for the public to access that information. Transparency through online filing tools is critical in our view. We need to make sure that any ordinance that may be proposing or enacting changes actually comes with the resources to enable our system to be modified to accommodate the expectation that we create by having new laws and new disclosure requirements on the books. So when we've looked at some of the recent policy initiatives that have been proposed or initiated by the board, we're estimating at this point, again, a ballpark of about $150,000 for FY18 to accomplish implementation of those according to the timeline that the legislation is contemplating. We also just had a conversation about translations. One of the things that we have not done a good job at historically is actually identify line items and costs that will help us translate our information to communities that may not be they may not have English as their first language. So making sure that we can try and broaden our outreach in that way, we've identified a ballpark at this point of about $5,000 a year. That would enable us to expand on a regular basis our outreach to make sure that our documents and information online are updated as they need to be, working with the appropriate offices in the city to do that. But we've sort of have had to play catch-up over the past years with where is that money going to come from. It's a pressing need, and if we're going to continue to really reach out to a broader community, then that's important for us to have the resources in the budget and funded to reflect that work and to support that work. In our staff development and training, this is something, again, having the right staff positions is critical, and also having the right staff with the right skills and training and refreshers is really critical. Jessica and I know from being able to participate at COGL, the Council on Governmental Ethics Laws, that there's a tremendous resource there for all of our staff to understand recent trends, to build up skills and new ideas. And so being able to make sure that we have some staff each year, attend the conference is something that, in my judgment, is a very important thing to do for our agency. And also providing the kinds of skills training, onboarding for new investigators. Deposition training is one of the things that Jessica's identified for our new investigators when they come on board. Some of these things may be one-time costs. Otherwise, there may be other areas where we've identified $1,000 a year, for example, per staff person to go to and really strengthen their skill areas is something that we would like to identify. We've identified some specific areas, but we also need to take a hard look at how we can support staff, both in terms of recruiting exceptional staff, keeping exceptional staff, and building our exceptional staff. In the third area, this is something that is a bit a broader question that we're trying to get a handle on over the next month. I'm not interested in coming to you with a blank check request, but I think it's important to recognize that as we have expanded our staffing to 22, we have now saturated our existing office. So we have one conference room left. And if we were to be appropriated, authorized, and funded for 2 additional people we're asking for, we would have no conference room space in our office. The bottom line is we need to modify our office space or potentially over time explore whether there is a different space that our offices need to be located in to make sure that we have the room to do the work that we're required to do. We want to be expanding our training. It's very difficult to find space in City Hall to do that. So we're thinking big, and we know that that may be a longer-term effort, but in my view, it's very important, again, once you have the right people and the right skills, doing the right work, to have the right kind of support that will help deliver the kind of work we expect in the way that we expect it. So that's something that we're going to be talking to the Department of Real Estate and other departments in the city to understand what that might involve, understand what those costs are. But it is something that I think needs to be recognized as a cost. It cannot be an afterthought. It will mean that we are hampered in perhaps expanding our staff to the appropriate levels simply because we don't have chairs to put people in. So I do want to be, again, thinking big and pressing for the idea that we need to have appropriate space for staff and for training and for the work that we're required to do. And then lastly, I want to come back to a fourth point, and that is making sure that we continue to extend the use that we have been planning for key performance indicators across all areas of our work. One of the things that we're very happy about is that we've started to track in baseline ways information about, for example, our enforcement caseload. How old those cases are, of what nature they are. That has been critical to enable all of us to ask very important questions about how we're going about our work and whether we're going about the work in the best way. It enables the public to ask questions, and it enables you to have appropriate oversight and ask questions. We need to expand that kind of process to all of our areas when we start restaffing in some new areas. And so those are kinds of indicators that we need to develop and put in place so that we can tell the public and you all how we are using these very important dollars to accomplish the goals that the voters have set for us. And we believe that that's going to be an important piece of it, too. We don't want that to get lost. It's something that we've started to do, but we've not been able to see through because of competing priorities. But we are committed to doing that in the coming year because we know that the city has very important choices to make about where it's spending its money. And we will hopefully be able to make the pitch in the next month's budget with your approval that this is a sort of budget we need to continue to build on so that we can see our work through in the way that we have identified in the vision that you set forth last year. So that's a bit of an overview. I would say that in sum, the request that we're looking for at this point is approximately $513,000 for FY18 and approximately $338,000 in FY19. Again, ballpark subject to some refinement, but to give you a sense, that's about a 15% increase and about a 10% increase based on current operating budgets figures. So I just wanted to give you that overview, and happy to answer any questions you have and get your direction for the development of our policy document for next month's submission.
What kind of surplus is there in this present, in the budget that we're in now, where we had supposedly we were going to have 4 investigators on board? We don't have any of them, and maybe it'll be March, so that for a period of from July to March, we didn't pay any salaries for those.
We do have.
Does that result in our having a pot that we can shift over to 18?
No.
18?
No, unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. If organizations, if departments are saving money one year for whatever reason, we aren't allowed to shift them. It's the use it or lose it concept. There are other areas where we are able to the extent that we can use salary savings, either to have part-time staff or to use it for other appropriate functions, we'll do that. But it is clear that when we have salary savings, that's not a question of whether we're going to fill those positions. It's a question of when. So they are all on track. And if I might just, I don't want to get ahead of myself because I was hoping to talk about that during the executive director's report, but it is something that affects both our enforcement work as well as our work generally, the delay in the time that it takes to hire staff.
But I'm just curious, is in terms of what we budgeted for 16, 17, we aren't going to be paying the salary amounts that we budgeted.
Mm-hmm.
And you say that just goes by the board, so we will have spent less money than we were authorized.
Mm-hmm.
Can we use that as any kind of a carrot to the city and say, look, you know, we didn't spend all the money that we had, and so we had to get some more.
Yeah, I unfortunately, I don't think they'll see it as a carrot. I wish I could say that. And I wish I had. I don't have, but I will get to you and make available publicly, too. What is the amount of our salary savings right now? We went through an exercise looking at our salary savings and our encumbrances over the next 6 months and some costs that we have been deferring. So to the extent some of those costs that are deferred are appropriate to be used through salary savings, we would do that. So I want to make sure I get you that information, but I don't have it, so I don't want to state it inaccurately.
Right. So to the extent that, for example, there's $20,000 worth of case management software that would be a potential expense in FY18, could that be pulled forward into this current fiscal year if there are enough savings?
I think that's possible if we can identify it. And again, I want to make sure that the salary savings can be used for that function. And I don't have that information sitting here because I know there are some restrictions on what that money can be used for. So, but I think, again, last month when the commission heard from the mayor's budget analyst, there was recognition that the fact that we have not been yet able to fill positions does not sound like that's going to be held against us in terms of you obviously didn't need those positions. I think there is wide recognition that there is a process that the city has to go through for non-exempt positions, which is more than half of what we've been hiring. And there is a process and time that it does take. We've been able, for example, to use salary savings this year to bring on board through a work order a senior personnel analyst from the Department of Human Resources who is dedicated solely to our department's hiring processes for the next 6 months. So we've been able to use, and again, I don't want to misstate the dollar amount, but we've been able to use a significant amount of salary savings to essentially help pay for somebody who will help us prime the pump to get those staff in the door.
So I had a question about the guidance that the mayor's office has provided about the possible 3% reduction. What's concerning to me is that we are just getting started with this new FY17 budget and trying to hire the 4 additional FTEs, and that if the 3% reduction is going to be required, that would effectively eliminate half of those. Right? So I would suggest that as in the budget submission that we put forward, that I think it would be unwise for the city to require us to eliminate those positions. The biggest savings that we have would be from staff positions, because I think it would send a terrible message to the people of San Francisco that we will give you money in FY17 and we're going to take it away 1 year later. That means that they're not serious about ethics, and I don't think that's the message that the city wants to send. I don't think that's what the mayor certainly believes. But by virtue of requiring across-the-board 3% reduction in that fashion, that's in effect what's going to happen. And then second is the 2 FTEs that you mentioned on page 3. Is that would be 2 net new positions, so that would bring the total staff count from 22 to 24. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. and that would be the cost of what is it, 500 and change in FY18 and 338. So all of these initiatives. So the net effect would be an additional 800,000 to the budget by
roughly
FY19.
at this point from what we've identified.
Commissioner Keene.
Yeah, I just want to associate myself with Commissioner Chu's observations, and I agree with her very strongly in regard to that in terms of not allowing any of those cuts to take place. The other thing that I would just, I'm sure you're up on it, but you are still somewhat new to the city in terms of the kinds of games that are played in the budget process in regard to the mayor's office and the board of supervisors. Commissioner Kopp will agree with this, a longtime member of the board of supervisors, and that is that you have some confidence, and I'm glad that the mayor is not going to look at the salary savings because we haven't been able to fill those positions and say, well, you didn't use them, so you didn't need it. You have some confidence that the mayor is not going to do that. That's great, and I'm probably your confidence is correct. But you got to watch out for the board because the board, they can't add to anything, but they can cut. And so when they see, particularly Harvey Rowe's office, they see, well, they haven't used that. You're going to have a recommendation, likely going to have a recommendation from the budget analyst's office. They haven't used it, so we're going to cut it. So you may want to, maybe I'm just, and I don't presume to, if I am, to be lecturing on something that you're already covered. You may want to start lobbying the budget analyst and getting in the ear of the budget analyst for the board in regard to the whole aspect of them not snatching away that part of your budget, our budget, that has not been spent because, oh, well, you didn't spend it, you didn't need it. To me, that would be a big concern. I mean, I did the budget for the Public Defender's Office for 20 years, and these were the things that I had to really watch out for.
I appreciate your wisdom on that, and I think that's an important note to underscore. So I, again, with the policy direction that hopefully we can come out of tonight's meeting with, very much making a priority getting in and early to these conversations about the budget, demonstrating very clearly what the ongoing need is and the expanding work is that many of the board members are looking for us to provide. So I think there is a good basis to make those arguments that you're suggesting.
Yeah, and you got to get it from the budget off because the members of the board, they're dealing with this massive amount of stuff, and they rely almost totally on the budget analyst. So if the budget analyst says, well, they don't need it, cut it. They'll, no matter what kind of presentation you make, they're going to go with the budget. So you have to have the budget analyst wired on these things, or else it's not going to happen.
Commissioner Kopp?
I'll just add for informational purposes that the charter has been changed. And from 25, 35 years ago, so that they'll take the mayor's budget analysts for the board will examine it and then make recommendations of reductions. The board will effectuate those reductions, and then the board has the legal right under the new and improved charter to add money back to substitute for what it has reduced from the mayor's recommendations. So that in effect you have two opportunities. The recommendation, of course, of conferring with the budget analyst is one. But after that, you'll have certain champions on the Board of Supervisors if something needs to be rectified.
Do we expect that all the open positions will be filled by the end of the fiscal year?
Yes.
By when?
By the end of the fiscal year, so that when...
End of the fiscal year is June 30th.
Yes, and the answer was yes, we do expect to have it filled by then, and sooner, I believe.
Terrible.
Let me say, I think that the groundwork that Ms. Pelham and I assisted some in meeting with the mayor and some of the supervisors and a number of the supervisors talking about the budget. There was real enthusiasm for what you were presenting. And I think that I think what you outlined here, which is a step forward, that they will be receptive to, because I think they were receptive to what we asked for, even in the face of the mayor at that point wanting a 3% cut and a 6% over 2 years. And I don't think we should be bashful. I think we keep moving forward. And I think there's a sense, both in the mayor's office and at the board, that the commission is much more active and is much more effective than it was in the past. And I don't know whether any of them, in the face of our 85% on Prop T, are going to say, well, we're going to start cutting the Ethics Commission. So I would go forward in the direction that this memo says. Do you want a motion on that regard, or?
I don't think it's necessary, but if the commission feels so inclined, it's always welcome. But I'd leave that to you.
You've got to do it by February 21st.
Yes.
All right. Got anything to say?
Any public comment?
Good evening, Chair Rennie, Commissioners, and Executive Director Pelham. I'm Hulda Garfolo, a friend of ethics, and I just wanted to say that Friend of Ethics strongly supports the Commission's framework for the operating budget for the coming year. The new and improved website, which was discussed earlier, is a demonstration of funds well spent. Additionally, it has been reported in the media lately that this commission has an enormous backlog. However, those reports fail to mention that that backlog is due in large part to understaffing and inaction of the previous executive director and his lack of enforcement. The budget requested will be, in the long term, a cost savings for this city, and this commission and its staff are to be commended on the exemplary jobs that they've been doing to put things on solid footing. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other public comment?
Larry Bush, also with Friends of Ethics. My career has been spent a lot with elected officials, and I've learned that they learn something from position papers, but they learn more from anecdotes. And just talking to Steve Massey about the major donors filing on the ethics page, it's a paper filing because there was no money to make it an electronic filing. And if you were to use that as an example of the kind of things that could be done with this budget and should be done, you would probably find 11 supervisors who would immediately agree that yes, major developers' filings should be electronically filed so that they are much more readily researched. So a few examples like that underscore what's in the position papers. But excellent work. Thank you.
Thank you.
David Pilpel again. A couple of points. I'll admit that I have not been in the 25 Van Ness building recently, but the last I recall, room 70 downstairs was a large conference room, and perhaps that can be used for staff meetings. I support the direction that is proposed. I think you do need to take a motion. The charter still requires each commission to have a budget hearing, and I think this is it for next year, tonight and right now. And so I think a motion of support is in order, and I support that. I hope that the staff report for this item will be posted on the website, and ultimately the budget submission with a summary of the 24 positions, the 22 base plus the 2, the 5 to 800,000 increment, the whole 9 yards will be there. And I think what you really need to support both the current budget and the proposed increase in anticipation of Commissioner Keene's perceptive view is some more data on the backlogs in audits and enforcement, and that really, more than anything, I think, makes the case for funding the existing staff and funding the expansion so that we're right-sized, as you've properly used the word. And the more you can get that out there, attach it to the submission to the mayor's office, support that with the budget analyst, be around in June for all the fun and games, et cetera. That's all to the good. And just finally, we originally had 3, now we have 4 new supervisors. If the staff, perhaps with Chair Rennie, haven't had the opportunity, I hope you will sit down with them, explain the backlog, explain the history, understand what their priorities are, talk about the translation and the other stuff floating at the board, the need to fund new programs, et cetera, et cetera. I think that's all to the good, and hopefully they will be as supportive as others have been in the past for doing the right thing. Thank you.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman, of Ms. Pelham. Why do you, on page 2 of the graph, refer to non-grant funding?
Thank you for the question. This is a term that is kind of a term of art used in the budget document, and that essentially means operating stuff. The grant funding, as the budget refers to it, is allocation for the public financing program in our instance.
Thank you.
Well,
I learn something every meeting.
I tend to agree with Mr. Pelpel, and I would welcome a motion to endorse the proposals that are outlined in the staff memo.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried unanimously. Turning to agenda item 10, discussion of enforcement report and update from various programmatic and operation highlights of the enforcement program. Ms. Bloom?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I'll try to be brief, but I've been busy this month doing some policy development and some research and analysis, and a little bit of investigating as well, which we'll talk about later. But I drafted and researched the suspended investigations and parallel proceedings policy, which we talked about earlier. We're also looking at the best way to move forward with a weekend filing deadlines policy. That's become somewhat critical as we work with NetFile to do some improvements to our website in our filing system, and to input deadlines for the year's filings. Some of our ordinances give grace periods for weekends and holidays, and others do not, which makes it somewhat confusing for the coders and for our fines collection officer. So we want to be consistent, and so we're probably going to do it as a matter of regulation in our enforcement regulations, and you should be seeing that in the next month or two. I spent a good deal of time preparing for and attending a Sunshine Ordinance Task Force Committee hearing as a result of the Michael Porcellis complaints against the Ethics Commission related to, the first was related to the sign that he brought to the meeting in, I believe it was September, and then the second was regarding the meeting decorum paragraph in November that was read aloud. Mr. Porcellis believes that we violated the Sunshine Ordinance in a couple of different ways. The task force disagreed with him with regard to the sign, which is good news. The committee did, but they referred it to the full panel of the task force, so I have to return for a meeting on February 1st in the evening. And then the task force committee found that we did not violate the Sunshine Ordinance in some ways, but did in others with regard to the meeting decorum paragraph. But essentially their argument is that we did not require or provide public notice and comment on the meeting decorum paragraph, and that it was a policy that should have been noticed and made available for public comment. We think they're wrong, and we think it's important enough to continue with the hearing, even though that violation is fairly easily remedied by just noticing it for another meeting. So we want to press the task force to come to the right decision on that as sort of a matter of precedent. In terms of operational updates and investive caseload data, we provide the average complaints and the time periods of their age and when they were first brought to our attention as complaints. Sorry, I'm starting to get tired, so I'm losing it. But some key takeaways are that the complaint numbers have started to taper off post-election, and so we've been able to get to some of the older investigations. You saw the hearing on the merits. I've been going through a couple of other older matters to review probable cause reports, and we presented some cases for dismissal at this commission meeting. So we've been doing a lot of good work in terms of getting those investigations moving, and which has resulted in sort of a plateauing of our complaints and our intake, because as we dispose of cases and add cases, is sort of like staying level. I would expect that to increase when we get investigators, because we do have so many matters still in preliminary review, and a lot of those matters in preliminary review are there because they aren't easily disposed of as lacking jurisdiction. They actually look like they might be cases, so we want to do some digging before we would recommend dismissal. And once those all become complaints, we'll have a pretty healthy investigations caseload. We provide year-end data so that you can see how many complaints we received this year. Unfortunately, there's nothing to compare that to, because prior to Leanne's arrival, they did not track incoming complaints. If they were just dismissed for lack of jurisdiction, they just weren't tracked. And if they didn't become formal complaints that were investigated, they weren't tracked. So this data is sort of a baseline for what happens next year and the next year, so we can sort of look and see if our outreach efforts are resulting in more complaints, where we're failing in what areas of the law, and what we can do better to improve public participation in this process.
I have a question, Chair Rennie. If you were to install the case management software, would tracking those complaints be done through the software, and would that make it possible to know how many complaints come in, what actually gets dismissed? Okay, thank you.
Yes, that's a good question. The case tracking software is necessary for so many reasons. That's one of them. But essentially, as a matter of your information, we're keeping track of all this information on Excel spreadsheets right now, and that can be subject to a lot of human error, and it's a little bit chaotic for us who are trying to maintain all this data and all this information. For every complaint that we receive, we have to enter it on a preliminary review tracker. If it becomes an investigation, it goes on an investigations tracker. And then that also goes on a master complaint tracker. Then we have another spreadsheet that keeps track of deadlines.
It's all manual.
Exactly, and it's all manual, and we do calendar appointments. So it's really, it's probably like nothing you've ever dealt with before, because, it's just the magnitude and the lack of technology available to us to manage it is overwhelming. And so that's why we really conceived of the case management system. We're actually going to the FPPC on February 9th to meet with the enforcement division there, because they spent the last year developing a case management system that's tailored to state ethics laws. And so we're hopeful that that will be something that we can just easily buy and create for San Francisco and use it and sort of link it up with NetFile. Our vision is that each filer, from the time that they are participating as filers through an enforcement action, would be represented in the same system, so that we can sort of see all at once their compliance history, their fines history, their enforcement history, and we would know that if they filed again, right? Because, like right now it's all kind of based on memory, if I've seen that person before. And so it'd be good if we could just have one person with one number, and that's their identification number. And then, as you saw, I've met with the Bureau of Delinquent Revenues, along with our fines collection officer, and sort of did a deep dive with them over how the collections process works. It was a very informational and informative meeting, and they're very nice over there. And as you saw them, they're on top of it. They know what they're doing. And I had some questions based on my knowledge of how collections processes worked for my environmental enforcement cases, and they seemed to have the right answers and know what they were talking about. So I was pleased with the outcome of that meeting. And then you see, nevertheless, our delinquent filers are apparently don't have any assets, so they just remain on our delinquent filer list. And so I think with that, I'll open to any additional questions.
Questions, any of the commissioners? Thank you for the report, which I thought was very complete. And any public comment?
Larry Bush for Friends of Ethics. At our Friends of Ethics meeting this week, we discussed an alternative option that we wanted to respectfully suggest the Commission consider at a future meeting, and that is an ability for low-budget committees that have committed violations to satisfy the penalties by community service as well as with dollars. When you have a well-funded committee, they don't have much problem coming up with the money to pay off a penalty. But if you have a committee that's raised perhaps $5,000 or $10,000 and they're hit with a significant fine, they have a hard time raising it. But community service is the kind of thing that most of these smaller community committees actually do. And there are ways in which they could provide a community service either directly to the Ethics Commission or into a pool that the city would have, and then the ethics could apply for some of the community service hours. It just recognizes that there is a world of difference between high-value committees and community-based groups, and that each has their strengths. The community-based groups do have an ability to do outreach, whether it was outreach for your upcoming policy meeting that's on your agenda, or if it was developing something in another language to augment what the Commission has, or from other things. There are different ways of doing it so that it does not become an increased political asset to them, but just becomes an asset to the community. So we are respectfully requesting that when you look at the question of enforcement, that you look at an option of community service under certain circumstances for lower budget groups, not for big money people. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
David Pilpel again. Two items here on the Sunshine Ordinance Task Force matter with Mr. Petrellis. I did not attend that meeting, but I would agree with staff that there's nothing in my read of the Sunshine Ordinance, or the Brown Act for that matter, that requires you to take comment and have a scheduled item on meeting decorum. A legislative body can have and should have reasonable regulations regarding public comment, but it doesn't speak to how that occurs. And for the task force to read some requirement that you had to have a calendared item before you could talk about appropriate meeting decorum seems excessive to me. You certainly could choose to do so. You could amend your bylaws. You could do any number of things, but I don't think there's anything in the Sunshine Ordinance or the Brown Act that requires that. So perhaps staff will say something along those lines at the February meeting. Regarding the charts, which continue to be totally helpful, just one point, the open formal complaints, those track from the first chart to the second in terms of the aging and the detail by age and type. The second chart, though, the matters in preliminary review, doesn't track. So, for example, it shows that there's one case that's 24 plus months, but then it moves over to 22 to 24 in terms of the detail. So somehow that didn't align perfectly. It was close. It was very close. Anyway. Yes, it's an alternative fact. Yes, that's never mind. But this is very helpful, and in particular now the chart at the end that shows the ongoing status of enforcement caseload. Hopefully it has grown to this point, but hopefully it will diminish over time, and we will see important things before you and other things may be dismissed, et cetera. And then, of course, it wasn't clear, since this shows 28 current cases that are open and formal, why the agenda for the closed session item later refers to 30 cases, but I'll ask that later. Okay.
Cut-off dates.
Oh, okay. But they're close. So
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. Just so you know, people do read this. Maybe I'm the only one. Anyway, thank you very much. Great report.
Turning to agenda item 11, the executive director's report.
Thank you, Chair Rennie. In the interest of time, I will try and be brief, but I did want to spend a few minutes on some very important news. The first of which is we covered the budget discussion, so thank you for that in our prior item. In terms of staffing news, I included in Table 1 an update of where each of the positions is in the process, and there's a bit of additional news that I wanted to announce this evening in terms of one of the positions. We show on the Table 1 the Information Systems Business Analyst as the selection process underway. That position has actually now been filled. I'm happy to report. And I'm particularly happy to report that Jared Flores, our current campaign finance officer, will become the new IS Systems business analyst to work very closely with Stephen Massey on all things related to our e-filing conversion project. And Jared brings a lot of experience having hands-on, handheld guidance on our campaign finance and other systems over the past 10 years that he's been with the Commission. So we're very excited that he'll be there to really help, again, from the user perspective, think about what our systems have to be designed to do. He'll be moving into that role very soon. On the 30th, we're going to transition him away from answering all the important questions, but we're probably going to pull him in for a bit with the upcoming filing deadline, the end of the month. But it really is an important, really critical function to be served to help our electronic filing process get underway. So you'll be hearing more about that probably next month as well. But that was very good news. And I'm very hopeful that we'll have additional news on one of the other positions that's currently underway for the selection process for your Commission meeting next month. There is... I was asking, I did an analysis. I just wanted to provide a bit of insight into the process that we're going through for our positions. And on average, when I did a bit of analysis looking at the positions that we have, both exempt and non-exempt, if you look at the position, the process of from posting a position to filling a position, the exempt positions, starting with deputy director and our education and compliance assistant and the position that Jared's moving into, on average have taken about 3 months once they are posted to actually have a person in the office. When you look at it from the date that the position was created or became vacant, it's about a 6-month process, 5.5 to 6 months, which is a very slow process when you think about it. And it's also not so hard to believe when we have so many positions in play. So one of the challenges that we've had for all of these positions is the nature of our staff currently is that we don't have a personnel person in-house. We don't have a finance or a budget officer in-house. So these are the roles that we sort of learn to do and manage as we can. That said, we're working through it, and we're very happy to have the support of Doris Lorio from the Department of Human Resources, as I mentioned earlier, working with us to get these positions through the process. The 3 investigator positions, the sort of senior investigator positions, are going through the exam process as we speak. We expect to rate the exams the first week of February, and then they will be consolidated onto a list, and then we have to select from the list the rankings and bring in people for a panel interview. So I think the best guess at this point is that we're looking at mid-March as optimistic, but it is on track. We have 2 other positions, the more... I don't want to say the junior, but the investigative analyst position. The applications close for that on the 30th. The applications close for the policy analyst position on the 31st. So those also will be working through the same process of exam-based testing to determine who's on the eligible list, who we can bring in for interviews. But those are working their way through the process. And so I'm happy to answer any questions about this. I share the the frustration over the challenge of getting folks in the door. We want them there yesterday, and it doesn't happen fast enough for any of us. But I also feel confident, and I think it's important to let you know that the process is on track, and I think we have been aggressive with the Department of Human Resources general time frame, and they've been very willing to work with us to try and keep things moving, recognizing that anytime you have 8 to 10 positions that you're recruiting for and examining for and selecting, there will come a pinch point, and I think that's the point that we were at in late fall. But we're making progress on this, but I am happy to answer any specific questions you might have or if members of the public have about the process and where we are. To finish I'm sorry.
A question about the auditor position, the one that was became vacant in November.
Yes.
When do you expect the recruitment documents and the announcement and the job to be posted?
We're working to have that posted the end of this month.
Okay.
So we're in process to try and get those documents in the door and approved. And then that will begin the exam process. Any other questions on that?
Could you send me the job spec description on the investigators?
Sure.
Thanks.
Happy to. Another note, I have listed the legislative and policy items that are moving through the process, and with attached the language. 2 of the items relate to proposals that would address the campaign finance ordinance. And on the policy plan, you'll see that at this point I've tentatively placed them in sequence with a broader review of the campaign finance laws to early part of the spring. But again, if you have feedback individually or comments on that, I'm happy to talk with you individually about what your sense is for timing. It makes sense to us to try and incorporate them in the discussion about what all the moving parts of our campaign finance laws are so that we can really try and get a handle on how they fit together. But I wanted to just highlight that for you. And then one other note, the audit program, as we will discuss more next month in laying the groundwork for some alternative thinking about how we might select audits for this year. We have met with the auditors from the Controller's office, and the Controller has been very cooperative and helpful. His office will be assisting our office with audit resources this year so that we can get through the campaign finance audits that are required to start by roughly April 1st. And so we're partnering with that office to obtain additional resources and leveraging their expertise. They have helped our office before, I think a couple cycles ago. So we were very pleased that they were so open to supporting that work again this year. We also, as you saw earlier, had Milad Daljou from the Oakland Public Ethics Commission here. This was a result of a memorandum of understanding that we worked and collaborated with the City Attorney's Office on to develop. So we have an MOU where we share resources periodically, whether it's for position hiring panels or whether for instances like this where we might provide some assistance on various topics. We just wanted to make sure that we were clear that it's a reciprocal sharing of resources on very similar work when those resources might be needed. So we were very happy to be able to avail of ourselves of that and also to report to you that that's something that we are working on with the Oakland Public Ethics Commission. And then lastly, we do have trying to take advantage of experts where we can. We have a visit with Katie Hinckley Kelly, who is the state and local programs director at the Campaign Legal Center, who's in town this week. And we met her at Kogel in New Orleans in December. And she was gracious. She was very interested to stop by and spend some time with our staff. So we're having a meeting with her in office this Wednesday. She's interested in hearing from us about what we find that works, what we find challenging, about trying to administer and enforce our ethics and lobbying and campaign finance laws. So we're looking forward to hearing from her about what their organization is up to in Washington with all of the issues at play, and she's very interested in learning from us, so we're very happy to have that opportunity to meet with her as well. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have about the report or anything else that might be happening in the office.
Yes, on the revenues report, we look to be in great shape given that we're about halfway through the fiscal year and we're almost 91,000 on a budgeted amount of 133. But looking at the lobbyist registration fees, they're significantly less than half of the 85, which is, if you just do the simple math, you would expect to be. Do you have any insight into why that number is so low?
I will need to follow up with you on that. I think there may be, again, a question of cutoff here. That lobby registrations come in the early part of January. but they may not all have come in at this point. So that number I would anticipate to go up next month to reflect a higher percentage of that budgeted amount. But I'm happy to get that information back to you if that is not the case.
Commissioner Keene?
Just on your guard, the lady from Washington whom you're going to be conferring with, she'll probably have lots of questions to you about the emoluments clause of the Constitution.
I'll butt up on it. Thank you for that heads up.
Any public comments on the Executive Director's report?
Larry Bush from Friends of Ethics. My comments on the whistleblower are well documented in the minutes that you already voted on, which runs through the specific things that I hope to be there. Now that this is going to go through another round at DHR and so forth, I urge that it also come back to the Ethics Commission, because you are the only body that's going to have a public forum other than at the board, the committee. But DHR doesn't have it, the controller doesn't have it, only you have it. And there are reasons why some of the other bodies are not as interested in a robust approach to whistleblowing as ethics would be. So I'm urging you to incorporate the things that we mentioned in our last presentation, and that you also have an opportunity for public input, even if it's not a regular commission meeting, an IP meeting, because there are an awful lot of people in the city who care about whistleblowing. Thank you.
David Pilpel again. Several points on the ED's report. First, regarding hiring, the old concept was that it took about 3 months for a new position to be hired, so a new position in the budget was only included at 0.75, assuming that it would start October 1st. If it's now taking up to 6 months, that seems long. I'm not saying that this is any of staff's fault, but if there are lessons that you're learning in going through this with the DHR person, if there are things that DHR or the controller's office or the city process writ large can fix so that it's back to more like 3 rather than 6, it shouldn't take 6 months to classify and describe and hire. That just seems long. Anyway, I'm sure you're feeling that stress that I referenced. With regard to the audits, I think we'll talk about that next month, so I'll hold my comments till we have a full report on the audit selection process. With regard to revenues, that was a good catch by Commissioner Chu. In putting the budget together, perhaps you can adjust the revenues so that they more match what the reality has been. I think the overall number is about right, but the more recent experience with lobbyists and various filers might suggest moving some of the revenue numbers around just a little bit. On the MOU with Oakland, page 2 was not included in the packet. We only have page 1 and page 3, so it's hard to read the whole document. I'm sure someone can share it, and perhaps on the website we can have the full document. It's fine. I also wanted to note, in the past, the Commission has had a reciprocal staff arrangement with other public agencies, depending on the matter and staffing and whatnot. So we've had the San Jose City Attorney, the the Santa Clara County Counsel, and I think even the San Mateo City Attorney, in addition to Oakland Ethics and possibly even the Oakland City Attorney's Office, have aided on various matters. And I don't know that there was a written agreement governing those, but it was perhaps arranged through the City Attorney's Office. Anyway, there's some history of reciprocal staff arrangements in the past, and staff should be aware of that. This was the first time that anything's been codified in an MOU, to my knowledge. And just finally, so I don't have to wait until after the closed session, I provided staff with some markups on the minutes. I wasn't here at the beginning of the meeting, and perhaps those can be taken into account. They're just minor and non-substantive. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Turning to agenda item 12, and I believe all the commissioners have received the confidential information relating to the subject matter of the status of complaints. Does any commissioner want to have us go into closed session, or is there no need for it, having reviewed the materials?
Well, Mr. Chairman, we didn't get the table that I've gotten used to. Or I didn't. And, huh?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
If we think we need to
You
just
got
clarify if there were others who did not receive it.
I don't think I did.
No.
Judge Kopp, I received yours, but I didn't look at the label. You received mine, so.
Oh, you're kidding.
No.
Huh.
Okay.
Oh, but it's the same
Yeah,
material,
but
right?
logically, I would have opened. Well, oh, I see.
You received the one addressed to me. I received, and you didn't open it because you looked at the label. I
Oh,
received yours.
All right. Well, I'm not going to take up time now because it's late, but I'll go through it and then
Yeah, well, and this will be.
maybe I'll confer with Ms.
And this will be on the agenda every
Yes.
meeting,
I know.
so that
No, I'm not
if there's
gonna-
something specific,
Yeah.
And our apologies for the mix-up on that. We will follow up. Endeavor to get it to the right people.
So we will not go into closed session, and we will not.
Well,
at this.
There's a couple here I see just quickly. Yeah, I've got one or two discrete questions that I guess I have to ask in a closed session. I'm sorry, but I do. Okay.
All right. Any public comment before we go into closed session?
That's fine. David Pilpel, that's fine. I won't wait. Could you just disclose, are there any stipulations that haven't been agreed to other than questions about the status of matters? None this month? Okay. If there's a way to formalize the announcement about stipulations that don't require a closed session, so you could do that either during the ED's report or now in the future, and then if there are any to disclose after a closed session, then just so that there's a better way to hear what stipulations were entered into. Thank you. Enjoy the evening.
Thank you. All right. We will go into closed session.
SF Gov TV, San Francisco Government Television.
All right, we are back in open session, and a decision was made in closed session not to disclose what was discussed in the closed session. Turn to agenda item 13, discussion and possible action on items for future meetings. Any suggestions by any of the commissioners? And hearing none from the public. Item 14 is additional opportunity for public comment on matters appearing or not appearing on the agenda. Any public comment? Appear to be none. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you very much.